The story begins with Cross wanting to talk to Iga, because there was a very important conversation to have. In the middle of that beginning, Cross says that they finally reached where they wanted, but that was not enough. He wanted to defeat the Whirlpool with that group. Iga says it sounds great and that everyone was very powerful now. But Cross was very sad. He was thinking about reorganizing the group, and about this there were some people who really would not fit into such an important mission because they would be an obstacle for the others. There is no doubt there is something good for them, and he asks if Iga was understanding everything, and obviously he was. He was certainly aware of all that situation, but Cross was crying at that moment and asks Iga to leave the group. Then we return 6 years earlier, when Cross came up to Iga asking if he wanted to form a team with him and become the best adventurers. That was at the Magic Academy, Iga asked, since when he had the honor of being recruited by royalty like that. But Cross asks if Iga does not think this life is very boring, and he should think about it, so he was in. They were discovering the world, fighting and defeating enemies, making new friends and reaching new goals. Cross was hating living this life with very strict rules, and Iga laughed at the situation. Cross asks what was happening, but it was that Iga was pretending to laugh at him like that. But honestly, at that time, Iga had the same dream. He did not care about nobility, reality, or loyalty and other severe rules. He wanted to freely do whatever he wanted while being paid every month. This is capable of developing without being controlled, without being forbidden. Iga wanted to be respected, to succeed, to be well known, and did not want to be called a coward. It was such crazy thinking. Because of that, Cross asks Iga to join the group and that they would reach the peak of all the adventurers' careers together. Iga ends up smiling and says that it was alright and that the two were available to start their own journey together, begging so much to give up the very idea of teachers to colleagues of magic, with the reason of being even though that occupation was very well known. Those who could survive and succeed were very rare. If there were no teams founded from the beginning, the amount without a doubt would go from 1 to 2 after 5 years, and as it was a bet that would live life. But Iga already had a misfortune, the first potential of Cross. None of them knew the real Cross was certain. Iga was a born hero. That title appears once every 100 years, and if a group is guided by a hero like that, many legendary adventurers would certainly come to join the group, and they could form a much more powerful team. And the reason why Iga could perceive so much talent was because of the other card that was in the ability of a present eye of a goddess, where he could see that the occupation destined for Cross was hero. This was an ability that was trained for so long and perfectly used when he was still in the advanced class of the Magic Academy, an ability that allows seeing the future occupations as well as strengths and, in addition, knowing skills in magic they would reach. Obviously, people did not suspect Iga because he had to make a horrible pose, and everyone said he was doing something strange. But everyone could also not worry, and that he was just someone weird. Iga never thought it was a bet like the others from the beginning, because he was certain that Cross was a hero. Of course, that damn career was not pleasant at all. He suffered monster attacks, and before the characteristics of the occupation destined for Cross awakened, he was totally useless. But fortunately at that time, Iga could handle most cases with his own ability more than basic. They had other part-time jobs to survive, and a week passed. Some adventurers asked them to stop fooling around like that, and that it was too early for the two of them to defeat that huge monster alone, and if they did not remember that last time they were almost trampled, and that it was absurd to think they could defeat like that after leveling up a few levels in 1 week. Soon Iga asks Cross to show everything he has, and yes, Cross rushes at the monster, cutting off its head with just one strike, and then manages to land calmly. People could not believe that was happening. And since when had that boy gained that strength? Not even a week. How could he do this in just 1 week? Of course, Iga was following Cross, and it was a blessing agreement, a second ability. With those abilities, since they were teammates with someone who does magic, they would certainly gain double experience. Soon, Cross and Iga call it that they touch each other's hand. That journey was becoming bigger and bigger, and after 5 years passed doing missions, finally the group was completely built. But the position of Iga's group, a present eye of a goddess, was useful when the members were novices, so it was a blessing agreement that joined the levels and raised everyone very quickly. But now, with these missions getting harder and defeating the Demon King approaching, those abilities were becoming only terrible. Without those two abilities, Iga was just an ordinary person, like any other, and he did everything he could to help. However, a request to leave the group was obviously an inevitable situation, and that would come sooner or later. But one night, Iga was talking, and so he tells Cross he would pack some items to give them. However, Cross says they did not need to do that. Soon, Iga says they are more precious items, and a girl says that some individual useful tools could even help. The team was alright. If the two people agreed with that, it was all fine. Iga stays quiet, but Cross says if he continues adventuring, he will need some essential items, and Iga says it was all fine as he was leaving. Roberta stands up and said that the next night they would board the Belt Ship, a headquarters of Adventurers Guild services, and for them it was the City of Glory as they always dreamed. That is why Cross says to Iga that the farewell party could be earlier tomorrow at noon, and asks what they should buy. Drinks take time, some pretty girls, and what are you thinking like a child? But one of the girls of the group gets very mad, and that was very bad. After the party, he has to talk a lot with the girl about separation. She could have plans, only that Iga says he knows what to do, that they could go home. But before Roberta ends up thanking Iga for everything he did, and Iga asks what he did, but it was nothing. They smile at each other, and Iga goes away saying good night. Iga was smoking on the way, saying that now he would have to go. But he did not know how to make a farewell party. He did not know how he could get out of that embarrassing situation, and that it was very strange. Entering his room, Aunt Anna was there saying good morning to him. Iga ends up startled, saying good morning, and asking why she was standing in front of his door. The girl asks where Iga was going so early, and he says he would run even with those packages. And understanding this situation, the girl wanted to know if Iga would leave before the farewell happened. Iga says that as she was seeing, he was going away, leaving without any word and any manly act, and it was not for stopping him. Only the girl says never, since telling him to leave the team and still saying goodbye was strange. Cross was terrible. And then she gives many papers to Iga, and Iga asks what that would be. The girl says they are the properties and payments for dedication and that he should check carefully. Iga asks if she was waiting since early to give him that, but the girl says it is very important. Soon, Iga asks if they could sit and talk. She gets embarrassed and asks if they could talk in the main courtyard, so they go sit there. And Iga asks where he should start, asking the girl what the two intended to do, but she says it is not his business. He apologizes, saying that from now on he is no longer a member of the team. Only the girl ends up embarrassed, standing up saying that was not what she meant. She says that because they have to separate after all, and things like intentions, she could not talk with anyone about that. Iga asks her to speak low because everyone in the building was sleeping. Then she looks at Iga, seeing that he was stamping everything, so she asks what his plan was after leaving. The plan was to meet another group, talk, continue a journey, but the girl says Iga is not suitable for that occupation. The skills are absurdly phenomenal. They helped a lot and improved a lot thanks to Iga in the end, and as she was a member of that group, she was very grateful for everything he did. Iga shamelessly says that in the end, his skills reached the limit. Iga says that if he does not try to improve, he will never know if he really reached it, but inside his head, he knew the girl was right. In the end, his skills reached the limit and no one was more aware of that than him. Now, he was 27 years old. Having some potential in reality was very rare. If he could enter another group and then use the skills to help them get stronger, then leave, continue running in that fatal circle, then build a new and considered building again on top of them. It was the end of the line for Iga. The girl gets sad, saying she knows that could be strange, but that she would take care of his responsibilities from now on, and hopes he could have the life he always wished. Only that he should take that thing soon. He asks what it was. A territory of 2,500 acres. That adventurer payment is not the only goal he could follow, and soon they ask about him being a lord. Suddenly, Iga was lost in a port. He did not know what to do right. Suddenly, they asked him to be lord of a land, and he did not know where to start. Soon, someone appears saying that finally they found the protagonist. The girl was accompanied by a man, and she said that Iga had just been expelled from a group, and soon asks if everything was fine. He left the group without saying goodbye to Cross, saying that he really wanted to make a memorable farewell party for Iga, but it was not to tell Cross all this, and certainly they would not do that kind of things. The two were also members of the group, but it was not to judge the book by the cover. She was an extremely skilled healer that all groups were envying, and beside her, Deli was considered the vanguard member of the group, simplifying in silence behind Ama when he did not need to fight. Soon she says it was very logical to expel useless ones like Iga, and soon she weighs down on what Iga was asking about, how many times he had not been a burden to the group, and if he ever stopped to count. Iga stays quiet, soon saying it was thanks to Cross and the girl that he was still in the group, and soon asks if he was not feeling guilty for all the things that happened. Deli holds the girl, asking her to stop that, and soon she looks back, trying to swing free. Iga asks if that was all she had to say, because the ship had already arrived. But soon she says They came there because they wanted to see that wonderful ship that was the sacred land of all adventurers, the magnificent ship, and soon she says they will see each other sometime. Iga boards the ship, and soon it begins to leave. The port was getting farther, and that feeling was hurting him more and more. Walking around, Iga ends up bumping into a person who soon looks back, asking Iga to use a necklace that helps with seasickness. He looks back, saying he would return the necklace as soon as he was better, but the merchant would not settle for that. He throws his suitcase on the ground, opens it with everything, and throws all his items on the ground, asking people to see what he had there. He calls adventurers, everyone there to enjoy the journey, as something essential, and that necklace as a health remedy was something that Iga, one of the 5 miracles, would love to use. So it was to enjoy using it for himself. Everyone comes closer, asking if Iga was a hero of the 5 miracles, the famous team, and everyone wanted to buy something, and the merchant starts making a lot of money. Iga asks how he was daring to use all of Cross's team as advertising. 5 miracles was what they all decided to call themselves. People usually think 5 miracles are only the people who were there, but in fact, the 5th person was a boy, a prodigy among the greatest attack magics. Summarizing, Iga is not a miracle. The merchant says that if he had not made that speech, no one would buy his things, and that is how a good merchant works. He apologizes for taking advantage of Iga's fame as an something. He introduces himself as Galcius. He is a merchant who was saved by the 5 miracles once. Iga feels that he knows him, but it was just a feeling. The merchant asks where Iga was going now, if it was to do a new mission to tell more. But Iga explains that he is just taking a sightseeing tour. The merchant is doubtful about people not being with him, and asks where the girl was. Iga replies that maybe she is with Cross. The merchant asked why Iga was sent out, and this makes the protagonist angry since that merchant was too harsh. But then that trip was to heal a broken heart. Understanding this situation, the merchant starts to leave, saying that he has a business meeting, but Iga asks him to wait a second. Out of obligation, Iga ends up activating his Eye of the Gods ability on top of Galcius to see if he has anything, and he really was a genuine merchant, even if he does not seem like it. When in fact, the number of people doing their destined jobs was quite large. Expectation was different from reality. So for example, a person who was very talented at fishing but in the end is just a lumberjack, or someone whose destined occupation is a player, but in reality he only works at the church. Galcius could be a good ally if really Iga could manage in the sense of the territory, and soon Galcius asks if Iga wanted to share feelings. He no longer has time, so he should go, then explains that he is just going to take a tour, and that was all. The eye started, people ask why it was not told to him before. Like that. Since then, Galcius became the company during the time they stayed on the ship, and that ship they must be approaching another port and ask where Iga wanted to go. It was a different city, the place where they defeated the giant serpent. In fact, the place where the group used all the forces they had to defeat a serpent is after those lands that were given to him as a reward. Soon, Galcius says that it was exactly where he wanted to go, so they could stop a little in a city before continuing, and when they get there, just say things to the merchant. Iga thinks it could be like that. And soon the merchant says that Iga is very kind, but they were just being flattered. Soon they enter the entry to the country of the Far East, and in that place, it was a country with a totally different normal culture. Iga was wasting himself, saying that it was time to relax a little and continue the journey the next day. But when he wakes up, he was with a drink in his hands, completely lost at that moment. A girl ends up appearing at the door, saying that it seems that Iga wanted to sleep a little more, and her services satisfied him the previous night. He ends up remembering everything that had happened, saying that now he got excited, but his head was hurting a lot. Soon she says she would help him change clothes, but Iga was very bad in the morning. He ends up using the Eye of the Gods to see that she was a healing sorceress. Soon he ends up taking the bill, and it was 50 million by the daily exchange rate. Soon she says that it remains 50 million because the coins are the same. Iga ends up thinking, but the girls explain the service to Iga according to what Galcius had said, that he chose the best class. Obviously Iga was irritated, then he ends up paying in cash. The girl ends up thanking him for his generosity. Her services were incredible, but he ended up spending half the money there. Going where Iga was going takes 3 days, and soon on another ship, Galcius ends up appearing, saying that it was a coincidence at that time. Iga decides to ask about that place, and soon Galcius ends up saying that it was magnificent and apologizes because he ended up testing Iga, and they ask why this happened. Galcius said that he considered that he had left the group, so he ended up thinking of other things. If he were tired of being an adventurer and had become a broken man, any merchant would want to stay away from him. And since Galcias wanted to see how much he would spend of money at that lodging, everything was a test to see him pay millions without hesitation, made him think that he was completely wrong, so he ends up apologizing for what he did. Iga ends up holding himself, saying that he was right, that he was expelled from the group. And until then, Iga told everything to Galcias that had happened, including that he would govern a territory. Galcias, understanding the situation, says that he always wanted to start a trade in that place. And that is how Iga says that Galcias will be a definitely important ally. But Iga explains that he did not even want to be a lord, but he still saw the kind of place he has to govern, and anyway, from now on he has no connection with the other 5. So Galcias could think of being Iga's assistant. If he does not want to keep company, he should stop at a port and follow his own business, as always. Holding back a little, Galcias passed by Iga without answering anything, and they did not even exchange a conversation after that. It was as Iga expected. Now he is no longer from a group, so he ended up becoming useless. 3 days passed, and Iga ended up arriving at the ship he should reach. It was a place that was completely taken over by animals. It was terrible, and everything was destroyed. Iga then asks if that place was supposed to be a port. He cannot even imagine how that would be working. According to the group's document, the territory starts from the next step, and when Iga does not step on the wood, the whole body starts to fall. It was much worse than Iga imagined, but now he was the owner of that place. That port looks terrible, and soon who was there was Galcias, asking if Iga will want help. Iga holds himself from crying and soon holds Galcias' hand. Galcias says that going from an adventurer to a feudal lord seems to be cool. He soon asks himself what they can do, yet he needs some time to get used to it. Then Iga ends up thanking for everything. Only at the moment Iga ends up getting Galcias' name wrong, which leaves the boy completely irritated, saying that getting his name wrong is a big taboo among merchants, and it was to remember that Galcias thinks he should go away and never come back. And now yes, they were the first steps to Iga's land. Iga's area was located on the edge of the far east of the country. According to the information, that place has 7 villages with a total of 2,500 people. Although he decided to go there to see where he could govern that land, it has been 2 hours since Iga appeared in that place, and he has not seen anything besides a single person. Galcias arrives startled, telling Iga that something was happening. Asks me why he is scared if he saw any place that had residents, but in fact, it was a monster being. Galcias asks Iga for help. Both start running. Its type is separated by the color of the eyes, with red eyes San Andreas more dangerous. Galcias says that they will lose his life now. Then Iga ends up preparing and uses magic to defeat those wasps once and for all. Galcias is startled and soon says that it was incredible since he can use a huge spell. That spell, after all, is nothing more than a simple offensive fire magic. All offensive fire magics have the same name, but for Iga's honesty, the intermediate or the strongest spell he could use, he could never understand how to acquire higher level spells. So it does not matter how much he tried, all the magical abilities are shamefully mediocre, and this has with some special exception. The monsters end up disappearing. Moreover, Galcias was very excited. They were just bees, so it was nothing less than a coward winner like him. They end up laughing, and soon Galcias asks if there is something wrong, but it was nothing. One day, maybe he will be able to defeat that kind of monster. Iga, or blessing chords on Galcias. Now he will gain double experiences after each battle, even Galcias being a temporary companion. The chord also continues working, and hopes that it has the same effect that it should have. Unfortunately, the ability has a very good range, so Iga was doing his best as always. Chord of the Pension was a really very useful ability, but Iga's abilities reached the limit, and this always crosses his mind. Maybe she is right. Soon they are walking a bit, and Galcias notices something different. There was a house there, in front, that looked more like a tent, and obviously it was a house. An old lady ends up coming out of there. Galcias ends up approaching, telling Grandma that they are traveling, and it was his first time in that place like that. Soon they start to think that they will not hurt her, and ask if she knows where there is a small village around there. The lady ends up getting sad, asking why there were travelers around there, and soon Iga starts to think that if they saw some silly place to travel. After explaining everything to the lady, she finally accepted, and it was they to the village. And soon Iga asks if she was living in that place, and she says yes. The neighbors and friends were taken by a giant monster along with her son, and now she lives alone without meaning each day. Iga apologizes while Galcias was crying, telling her not to be sad, but there is always hope in how long the best. The lady ends up saying that she is not weak and proves it while passing through difficult places. It was a strange feeling for Iga because Grandma is right, and he is sure that she has something much more special than that. In fact, her destined occupation was idle, and one should never judge a book by its cover. So it starts to rain, and so many hours later they were still walking. Aiga could not breathe right and think that they would be exhausted and confirmed with his own strength. If Aiga manages to tell Grandma that he is an adventurer, she would definitely laugh at him, just like Cross's team too. Aiga would have been wondering from what place it was outside the glorious city, where the twin princesses are everywhere. Soon after they end up tripping and Galcius asks if Aiga is okay. He ends up sighing for a while and ends up holding himself. He keeps asking himself why that action was stopping. Anyway, one day, weak monsters that hide in the shadows like a rat. Now, he was exhausted and almost lost his life, just for exploring that mountain. He could live a glorious life, become an excellent adventurer, gaining admiration and becoming everyone's hope, and then returning to the main city and celebrate as true with his companions. I did all the missions and demons of level 5, but Aiga knows that it was time for him to face reality. And soon the lady says that they finally arrived. After I go take a good look at the top of that mountain, he looked carefully at a place where the sun was hitting. Silence for a moment. Aiga observed the people who were down there. The lady says it is a large group of monsters that moved to the west recently, so the villages had no other choices but to migrate to the south. Hundreds. Actually, there must be thousands of them. Aiga asks what the people were doing. They are setting up a barricade. He has to be careful with the furious current. Aiga came to agriculture and has to check not only the condition of the soil, but also deal with water resources. That must be the biggest problem for that place that would be faced now. People were doing everything to survive, cutting firewood, tending crops, a beautiful scene that was not created solely by Mother Nature nor by human beings. It is created by the way humans interact with nature. Aiga had never thought about how he will govern that territory, but now for him that land was like a living being, so he uses his magic, because from now on he will become a lord. Looking closely, Galcius asks if Aiga will be or not an adventurer. Aiga says that he is not leaving that place, but that he has a special mission to fulfill on that land. He will transform that territory into a place that not even the strongest demon would dare to enter. And Galcius asks about the residents, but it was not to worry if Galcius forgot that he has that previous ability, the extraordinary ability that never failed him, the destiny of occupation, and the great foundation of the kingdom. Right after they go to the edge of the Far East in a forest, and there were other monsters coming, it was a horde of killer wasps. Officially, Aiga became a lord, so he has to go to the imperial city and receive the certificate of territory. But it was very troublesome. After defeating some monsters, the next boat would come only the day after tomorrow very early, so they should explore the southern villages for now, and the day after tomorrow they will arrive. At that moment, then a guy asks what they are doing at that moment, and so boredom had arrived. Soon Emma was talking with Aunt Anna because the tea asked for that genius girl are bringing with great delicacy. Soon Emma asks if the girl was listening, but she was daydreaming. She was ignoring a lot. Then Emma shouts with everything, but the girl was thinking and asks what was happening. Emma asks if she was worried about Aiga or something like that, but it was not that. Emma continues saying that it was not possible to help a weak person. Being expelled from the group was natural for Aiga. He was always pushed behind too. But soon the girl says to listen. They are going on a Demon King class mission, and she is unsuitable for that mission. To encourage him to have a life without worries, they gave him a great compensation. The whole team agreed, and no one sees a problem in that. But she was making a sad face. Provoking her while she makes that face was not fun. Soon some adventurers approach, asking if they could sit there, because the girls were very pretty. And then come the flirts. As Emma is a beauty, attracting those men is not uncommon, but unfortunately she was free, so they could have the honor of having a tea. But they had their eye precisely on the other girl because her pair of glasses made it seem that she was smart. The girl asks what they were wanting while Emma was trying to get a little attention, but she is pushed with everything at that moment. Deli appears holding those adventurers by the arms. Emma asked what he was doing there. Deli explains that he thinks she is the prettiest, and the girl thanks, but she does not feel happy when she is praised by that boy. The adventurers asked to leave, and everyone was so excited. Roberta ends up appearing asking if those guys wanted something with her group, but it was nothing. They end up getting scared, and soon the adventurers realize that all those people were from the 5 miracles. The girl says that they are very busy now and asks forgiveness, but they should clear out and they have only 3 seconds for that kind of thing. Then, they run away. Now that everyone was there, they should go to the sacred land and stay attentive to what was happening. Cross says that they will continue advancing to the next tiers and asks Aiga to keep an eye on them while he arrived at the port. All the people knew that they had arrived, and everyone had their eyes on the 5 miracles, asking for signature and anything it was. The girls were completely excited, and so everyone was waiting for them to do an interview about what the next objective would be. The girls were around Delhi, and so everyone starts to get startled. Delhi says that even being together, he cannot understand how he was the most popular among all the girls. Soon, a journalist ends up approaching Cross, asking if he could talk about the future plans for the 5 miracles and the purposes of having lived for that sacred land. Roberta ends up holding herself, saying where they go, the objective is to win all the battles. Then the purpose for that land is to accept the famous Demon King mission, and that was exactly it. But he has one more thing to say, so everyone stays attentive to note what was coming. Cross says that their battle has only begun, and that was just it. But it was a great remark that everyone was talking about. Emma realizes that Cross always says some cliché things, but the media keeps making that seem amazing. Soon, a journalist ends up asking them a question, even though the name of the group is 5 Miracles. But it seems that a member is missing and asks what was happening with the group. Everyone makes a sad face, and in fact, they have 2 people fewer. But no one knows much about Aga himself. Soon the girl ends up approaching, saying that Amarga was on her own expedition, and she will join them in a few days. So there is no problem at all. The genius mage was completely absent, and even being young, she could go on a mission alone, which was amazing. Marie, probably the strongest person in the group, and she is a hot topic as expected of her. A soft proposal, but the no problem part was a lie. When she returns and finds out that Iga was expelled, something would happen. Well, Emma was never the only one who came back on that, so they could take care of that whole situation. But about that, she wonders what Aga was doing now, if he was getting along with the people of his own territory. Meanwhile, they arrived at the village. They do not have many supplies left, so they will rest in the village. Iga asks Galshias what was happening, and he says that villagers are usually very cautious with strangers, so they could say that they are tourists. Everyone was around them, asking who they were at that moment and where they came from. Soon Iga then asks if they should surrender, or something like that. Galshias gets startled, telling Iga to get ready, but they were very kind, asking where they all came from, how old they are, if they are hungry or something like that. Those people were very hospitable. If they are married, are they tourists? If they have a place to stay? Soon the village chief says to stop, because they are causing trouble to the visitors, so his chief was there. Then they could have a calm conversation. But the village chief ends up holding on to both, saying that they will spend the night at the village chief's house, which was unfair because everyone wanted to meet the visitors. That night they were sitting on the box at the chief's house, and it was a huge place. The chief ends up apologizing because the villagers are very noisy. Iga wanted to ask to sleep there that night, but he was very attentive. In the end, he still served food and drink, and his wife was very kind and beautiful locally. Iga then asks the village chief what was the main occupation of the village. The chief ends up getting confused, but he means that people usually hate doing some things. They cut wood, they are mainly lumberjacks, and it was understood, and obviously it was noticeable because everyone was kind of muscular. The chief ends up saying that he has a good sauce, and after talking a little more in summary, the village is called Wood Village, and the population is around 150 inhabitants. However, lumberjack is not about cutting wood. Lumberjacks are related to wood cutting and sawing, processing wood and merchandise. They also act in transport of business on scaffolding. Iga asks if this kind of thing is profitable, and obviously yes, especially after the things that happened. The giant serpent that Iga's group defeated previously was wreaking havoc on the entire kingdom. Ironically, the attack increased the demand for wood, so the economy ended up growing considerably. Fall 7 times and stand up 8. These are the people of that place. They were as brave as expected of the chief. When Iga used the divine eye on all the villagers, he found that all of them were lumberjacks. The function of the divine eye is to show what is compatible with the job, show the skills and magic that these people learned, and to assess someone. It does not show the person's current occupation. To see the current occupation, there was a higher skill called Observe status that was necessary, and as a loser who only has some training skills, Iga could not actually learn it, so he cannot tell what the current occupation of those people is. But after calmly observing a bit, he ended up realizing that there are no lumberjack or fishermen around there. Some people have future occupations of adventurers, and he ended up checking the 10 youngest people in the village, and 2 of them occupy the adventurer category. That night, Galshias asks if Aga was thinking about things, if Aga uses his ability as if he were cheating. Iga asked what Galshias was thinking about that, and this Galshias ended up not understanding yet. that he should say which job was good and that he just had to put people in the determined occupation that the territory would grow. But Galcius ended up not thinking much about the situation. Then the next day, the village chief is surprised that Iga wants to go to another place, the largest village with 1,200 people. He just wants to take a look. Some people were taking trees to the nearby territory, so they will end up guiding Iga and Galcius to that territory that they wanted to go to. Thanking for everything that was happening, they end up being called attention. The village chief calls the attention of a girl saying that she should accompany the protagonist. The girl ends up approaching, saying that everything was fine, and Iga ends up introducing himself. Her name is Chio, and she was there, the martial artist who was seen the previous day. Galcius said it is a pleasure to meet her. Then she calls the attention of the lumberjacks to carry 10 at once. Iga asks if she will want a hand, but obviously it was not necessary because those guys were very strong. Then they were walking, and in the middle of the way she says to stop because the road ahead is not safe, so they will find another path. Then she asks the first group to make the turn and follow. All of them were to continue that way. The load movements are light. She could quickly help anyone to fix a broken wheel because it was just to ask. Disconcerted, they got stuck in the mud. But it was not to worry, everyone should push together. Iga will help too because it was necessary. So, after cleaning a lot, Chio was really an amazing girl. Besides that, she is very young. Chio ends up explaining that she does all this since she was a child, and soon Iga asks if she is a transport leader carrying the logs, as the chief said she was a good leader. In the end, the chief made food for the two. Iga asks what it was, and Galcius had a hungry stomach. In the end, after delivering the food, she says that rice grew in their village, and so, after a while, they end up eating. The rice was delicious, along with the water too. Iga ends up eating and ends up getting excited with what was happening at that moment, telling Chio that she ended up growing up in a beautiful place. The girl blushes and ends up getting excited about that. Soon they go to the largest village. Arriving at that place, Iga apologizes to Chio for making her guide them there, but there was no problem. They had just finished a delivery right there. But there was a problem that Galcius had noticed a lot. That village seems strangely quiet. Soon he wonders if the people there do not show themselves like in the old village. In fact, the people of that larger one hate different. There were children who were there, and Galcius tries to talk to her approaching, saying that he has chocolate, many toys with him too. Chio ends up asking Galcius not to approach them repeatedly, and soon the children run to all their mothers, and they run inside the house. And everyone keeps watching from the window of the doors, and even from the corners of the house. Galcius says that this kind of thing could not happen, and Iga realizes that he strangely, surprisingly likes children. Chio then explains that, different from the village, the residents of that place do not like strangers. Even Chio is not welcome in that place, being even less invited foreigners. It seems that they are more shy than cautious. Soon, Iga tells Galcius that last night he mentioned about people and their destined occupations, so it means if someone is a lumberjack, they will go straight to that place. 1. Chio cannot understand how someone would show up there, considering that it is how they are. It will be difficult for the people of that village to get used to it. And in the others, Galcius ends up saying that he understands what Iga means. Forcing people to follow their taught occupations will not develop the territory, and that was exactly what he was talking about. For example, if they wanted to create a group of the strongest in the world, then in theory, they need the 10 best swordsmen, the 10 best mages, the 10 best healers. Then, they would have the 100 strongest of their own classes, and that should work. But in reality, it is not something that simple. The problem is whether they will work together or not. If they will not, forcing them was totally useless. It was even more complicated for a territory. It is already difficult to form a group of 5 or 10 members, and Iga has to bring 2,500 people together. If you look at people too much in a scaled way, failure was inevitable. Development is agriculture and silviculture together. They are the best skills of each person. Balancing was extremely important, but this also will not be an easy path, and Iga knew that. Chio ends up not understanding what they are talking about, and if there is something she hates in her territory, but there is nothing from there. A boring land like urban people. But it was the opposite for Iga. That place was extremely interesting, and he really wants to live there. Soon she gets excited, asking if that was serious. Iga says yes, and next time he shows up in that place, he will build a house. And when the time comes, he will ask Chio to bring wood immediately. She says it was a promise. Then he said goodbye to Chio, and they headed toward the Imperial City, but it was cold, and Iga missed the bed from the previous day. He does not like sleeping outside and wanted a hot meal. Galshia says that he is very noisy and Aga wanted to live a comfortable life as early as possible. Soon the next day he will arrive at the port of another city and Aga ends up asking about rewriting the territory certificate. Galshia ends up asking if he really needs his help. Aga asks about why that moment would be happening at that time. But it was that Galshia really wanted to meet his own business partners, to say hi, and if possible as a merchant would, prefer that city, which was more imperial. So Aga should go to the imperial city alone. The train to the imperial city will not stop for 2:30, so he would need a cigarette now. After buying, he ended up smoking and reading the newspaper a bit. He cannot understand the language of that place very well, so he wonders if there is any newspaper written in the international language. After searching for quite a long time, many people said no, and there is nothing like that around. For Iga's honesty, he knows a place that could read a newspaper for adventurers right next to him, and looking closely, that place was empty. The Adventurers Guild, a Far East branch. The guild always has a branch in a place where it can take on some missions. The guild staff is sent to handle the missions and support the adventurers. Iga remembers that place after it was, where they returned from the great defeat of the serpent, and after all the information. But when he tries to enter it ends up becoming extremely complicated. How far the information about Cross's group went. Iga did not want to be ridiculed by the other adventurers, so he enters with sunglasses. A girl ends up welcoming him to that Far East Guild branch, then ends up welcoming and going directly to reception, where he could take missions, talk to clients, recruit members, various equipment for purchase. Iga says that it seems that it is not a high-level group associated with the Heroes group. He sighs and ends up picking up a newspaper to see what was running in the world. After reading a bit, the special news came out. The Brave Heroes group ends up arriving in a city, and that ends up leaving Iga completely lost. He looks up and ends up laughing and asking himself to stop feeling envy. He went through the articles about Cross and the other famous groups, and also checked the market excerpts about magical ores that supplied the ships, and 3. Then he thinks he will leave it with Galshias, but he also needs to understand a little more about this situation. The next is a magazine for adventurers, a monthly magazine that analyzes and ranks adventurers. In general, the ranking of the top 300 adventurer groups in 9th place were the 5 Miracles, so they are at least among the top 10. Individually in the global top of the strongest and 13th was Cross. He was in 40th place previously, so it was a big leap. Ama is in 57th place. She really was a true twin after all. In 1st place, it was still hers, the sword without magic as expected. Soon someone ends up appearing asking about Iga. He was the Roy Give. Soon he says why he was wearing sunglasses at that moment, but thus they end up getting completely irritated. Iga ends up telling him to stop calling him that way, and soon the heckler asks why he was doing that, because he and Cross always got along very well in the past. Iga remembers that guy was a classmate from the Magic University. He was the heckler. Soon, all the adventurers began to talk about Iga among the 5 Miraculous, because they heard that he was expelled, and that was unfortunate because that group will become amazing, but it must not be exactly because of that. It was a kind of selection before going to the main city. Iga ends up taking off his sunglasses and the heckler ends up asking why he was expelled. But that was not good, because he was always left behind. He was the 6th person after all. All the adventurers began to laugh at Iga, but everyone asked to stop that. But it was true, which was regrettable, because no one wanted to show their face after all that happened. Iga could not say anything to defend himself, and the heckler asks if Iga will leave early. Soon he says that the guild is for adventurers anyway, so Iga had nothing to do at that moment. Then he calls Iga an ex-adventurer, which irritates the protagonist looking back, but there's some woman ends up appearing asking to stop that. She enters with everything asking if it was Iga. The sword of that girl was magic and cut through the ground. They say she could control lightning and all. Everyone ends up admiring her anyway, so that was it. She was the great #1 heroine, and everyone asked why she was doing there, why the #1 was in that place. She says it was a coincidence, but a person like her then asks why she was in that Far East. Iga ends up saying that he says the same, because there are not many missions in the Far East. She says that it was true, but she was doing other things, some different tasks. Iga says that anyway she still likes the bikini armor. The girl asks if he does not like it, but it is not that he does not like it, but he thinks she should wear something that offers some more type of protection. The girl starts laughing, saying that that is what she shows her own muscles for, but it was not to say that. The heckler asks why she was there, to definitely have the chance to humiliate Iga, and that was not fun. The girl points to Iga saying that, on purpose, she heard that he was no longer in Cross's group. The heckler thinks the girl is going to mock Iga, but it was totally the opposite. She asks if Iga will want to join her, and everyone ends up getting quite startled. The heckler steps in front, telling her to wait a bit. But why she? The girl who is known as a lone wolf and prefers a loser like that to be her team. In fact, she thinks of forming a group with Aiga, and she has always been solitary because there are not many people who could work with her. But Aiga, even if he thinks little of himself, he still has much more capability than he himself thinks. Because after all, he has mastery with intermediate skills, and that was a rare talent. In the end, he definitely has a hidden potential. In the end, Iga ends up thinking that she knows a lot about him, but that is why she was saying that it would be good to form a group with him, and she was speaking completely seriously. And it is more than that. Iga will only get in her way if they join. As much as it would be very fun, he ends up taking a deep breath and apologizing, because now he has something he wants to do. For him, going on an adventure with number 1 is less interesting than making that place become strong enough to defend itself from a mission of the Demon King classification. All the adventurers find it amazing that Aiga was refusing the offer of a top 1 heroine, and she was laughing, saying that there is nothing to do because she would not like to force people to follow her path. And at that moment, Aiga says that he really appreciates the offer, so it was alright. Then she picks up the magazine to see her own ranking. Aiga says that he thinks she did not like that kind of thing. But of course she likes it. After all, she is very happy that she got first. She only came to see her own ranking. Then she says goodbye for now. The number 1 heroine was really a very good person. Then Aiga goes to the magic railway. There he gets on the train. He has some plans he wanted to test, but it was time to finish going to his own territory. But before that, he should properly become the owner of that territory for the Imperial City. Right at that moment, the Imperial City, Aiga, ends up arriving. It was already getting dark in the end. While he walks through the streets, he wonders where he should go. He had on the letter saying where it was written that he should go to the city hall first, but he does not know where the city hall is. Soon someone ends up excusing herself to Aiga, asking him to go to the side. The woman was almost stuck to him, so he jumps all the way to the side, and she thanks him for that. Aiga gets startled. He rarely sees women wearing suits in his country, and maybe the government office is around there. He decides to follow the woman to go to the Imperial City Hall, where there he ends up losing the license because he was there to rewrite the territory certificate. The woman understands, but she does not have permission for that, so she will call her own superior. The superior was necessary for the rights and territories, and soon the lord arrives, apologizing for making him wait. He ends up introducing himself, saying that he was the manager of the support department. However, he also does not have permission for that, so he will contact his own superior. The manager says that he is the manager of the planning department. However, he also does not have authorization for that, but his superior can. So Aiga is taken to the chief of the selected, but his superior also can. Then Aiga goes to the department director. However, his superior, Aiga ends up wondering why the rankings end up going up. He feels like someone important, or something like that. Soon the director ends up appearing, but he apologizes. The Great King has already returned to the palace, so it was to return with the application for the territory certificate at another moment, and they started the initial process. Iga asks if it cannot be done today because he wanted to start all this, and if he had been waiting the whole day and still will not get anything today. The director apologizes, but he will not be able to find it in the establishment to pass. Soon someone approaches, asking why the director was there. It was the minister who thought he had closed for today. The minister was the number 2 of the country, and he understands the situation. Then the minister welcomes Aiga, saying that it was he who defeated the serpent. But Aiga says no. The minister says that he is very modest, but if he was there to rewrite the territory certificate, he will ask for the process to finish tomorrow morning. But then the minister decides to give Aiga a ride, saying that he will become the owner, and soon. Then he was to stay in the palace for today, because he will entertain him for that night in the Far East Palace. Aiga ends up entering there and saying that it was giant. Soon he leaves the weapons at the reception and welcomes everyone. The food was wonderful and the minister was very generous. Aiga spoke with the minister while they ate and drank, and after seeing how he handled the problem in the city center, he thought he was well prepared and friendly. Particularly, Aiga was grateful for the minister, instructing about the management of the Far East territory. The Far East is a wide alliance of territories with the Great King as the highest leader. In the end, the Great King does not rule the lords, but there is no way to put any responsibility in particular or any kind of tax. In the end, it was almost like a self-employed. The minister explains that regarding responsibility, Aiga needs to attend the annual congress. But if he cannot come, if he has a good reason, the country has a very free policy. Then Aiga ends up saying that currently, he wanted to fulfill the missions of the territory. And for the minister, this was an interesting and problem-free matter. Aiga could do whatever he wants. The minister was very compliant. But however, if there is any sign of rebellion, there will be an immediate retaliation. Obviously, Aiga did not want that kind of thing to happen. He wants to strengthen his own territory so that it is capable of defeating monsters by itself. But as it is the first time doing something like that, he does not know how to communicate with his own people. The minister says that about that, they would use public news. Iga asks if everyone would know how to read in the Far East. The language is mainly taught by local priests. Only 10 or 29% know how to write. But most are able to. Iga ends up thinking a lot about that, because he actually does not know how to read or write the language of the Far East, and this is not good. This will end up hindering his governance. Then the minister ends up thinking a lot. He could take one of the secretaries together to the city, and Iga asks what that kind of thing was like. The next day, the name on the certificate was changed from the 5 miraculous to Iga's name. The Great River gave a bronze sword to symbolize his own lordship, and at that moment he became the owner of that kingdom. The minister ends up approaching Iga, saying that he looked very dignified in front of the great king. Iga did not expect that, because he was very nervous. Then the minister says that it was right he should take a break at his own house before returning. And at the minister's residence, it was a Western style, a beautiful place, and he liked that a lot. The minister says that Iga seems more comfortable in that kind of formation, but actually Iga says that it was so luxurious that he feels nervous, and soon asks why he was invited to go to his house. Soon, a woman appears behind Iga, apologizing, and so Iga throws himself back with everything. The minister says that that woman was his secretary. Igarashi ends up introducing herself in the end, and Iga thinks that it was the same woman from yesterday, and really she is very happy to be able to work with him. Iga says that he was also very happy to be able to work with her, and soon after asks the minister if it was she whom the minister was mentioning the day before, and it was exactly so. She being young, she is excellent at what she does, and will be a great help for Iga, and that if it was really alright, the minister says that he has his own reasons for doing that kind of thing, saying that Iga is a professional trainer. He was introducing excellent people to him, and that they would become great people in the future, and that was what the minister believed. Soon he asks if there is any problem. Iga thinks that he could not have the minister as the enemy. Besides that, Igarashi also came from the city where Iga is the owner, and soon after she should help Iga gain more experience, and she says that it was alright. Then going back by train, Iga says that it was his first time sitting in first class. Igarashi basically appears next to him, saying that that would be natural now, that he is the owner of a land. She has no sense of personal space. She was a very strange woman in the end, but he was there moving. And Iga asks her something if it is true that she was from that kingdom, and yes, soon Iga asked when she came to the imperial city, but she came because of the university, which was the Imperial University, and soon Iga asks how old she is. She is 24 years old. The conversation does not flow, which was suffocating for Iga. Her expression never changes. She is beautiful, but her eyes are very sharp and scary in the end. Maybe she was sent to go together with Iga, but she does not want to. If she graduated from a good university, has a good job, she suddenly becomes the secretary of a nobody like him, and would have to return to the homeland, which was bad. When Iga looked with the divine eye, he was already curious to know if she was a woman difficult to approach, but he realized that her occupation was bride, and soon she asks if there is any problem. Iga asks what kind of occupation that was. His new allies are strange, so it was time to strengthen his own territory, something he could hardly wait for. Then Iga ends up being called to attention because Galcius asks who that woman was. Iga ended up introducing her and the new companion in the end. Galcius knows that, but when he tried to say hi, she just did not give a handshake. During meals, she was in complete silence, and when they were playing cards, she just stayed in second place quiet. She also thinks that she was someone hopeless in the end, but she kept a completely serious look. Galcius thought she was a very strange woman and did not like her. Soon she approaches to talk to Iga, and he asks what was happening. She explains that they arrived in the city. Iga says that he needs to renovate that place soon because the hole from last time was still there. Galcius asks if they could not camp anywhere now. Actually, there is a woman with them at that moment, so the family must be somewhere around there. It should be time to look for them. Only Igarashi ends up speaking, apologizing in the end, and if Iga thinks it will be bad if we interfere in her personal life. Things got complicated in the end. Iga says that she could not feel comfortable being with them, but she says that it was fine, so they could camp outside all that time. But Igarashi says that that was not right. The territory is his. He could not sleep outside. He is the new owner of that place, so he should think more about his own position. Soon she apologizes for losing his composure. Then they start walking near the surrounding sanctuary. So, for now, that will be his locomotion. and at that moment they should move forward. But soon he wonders if she was angry like that. She was going up the stairs with such tranquility, what to do. The two boys, staying in slippers, because it was reminding of the Lady of the Mountain. Soon Igarashi says that they are there, and Aiga ends up getting excited about that. The temple approaches, and so the Lord who was there in the temple says that there was a young maiden around there. Soon Igarashi ends up introducing herself. The Lord is happy about that and says that now she has become a beautiful woman and that she should be the new owner of that place. He explains that the priest of that sanctuary, and for 2 generations it is from his own family. But the girl was acting completely strange in the end. The priest asks if the son should be returning soon, his son, and if he should call him to commit them. But she says not to call his son. Soon after, the boy appears right behind to tell why Igarashi was there. Those are important visitors, and because she is the assistant of the new owner of the land. The boy ends up getting confused, and Aiga ends up introducing himself, and soon he understands the situation. He was fired in the end. The girl says she was not fired. The minister was recruiting, so she volunteered to guide Aiga in the end. She was not hating that. The girl asks the boy to get away from her, but he does not adjust. He just returned from a dam construction. Aiga asks if it is that river near the village. The priest says that his son is a leader of deconstructor, that was something amazing. But the boy says that it was not something that amazing. Iga says that it was a great construction, so he knows that they should need an excellent leader. I guarantee says that it was, at the time, when the rice fields needed to be repaired, so it was done until today. Igarashi ends up getting angry, realizing that her cousin was being quite praised like that. She approaches Eiga to say that he likes to keep throwing a crustacean around, but the boy says that was when he was a child. Igarashi also explains that it was he who broke the head of a statue. The priest discovers that, at that moment, and so, at that time, the boy ends up denouncing Igarashi too, saying that she peed the bed until she turned 12 years old. Galshius gets completely disgusted by that, and soon Igarashi holds Eiga, saying that she does not do that kind of thing. Soon she sits saying that was only once, so they end up laughing a lot. It was right at that moment the boy already knew that Eiga was an adventurer, but thinks that kind of people are not capable of meeting their own expectation. Eiga asks why that is. Those people do not care as an issue as a whole. Even more if it is in order, they will not have what to do, and that was true. Even more if put in battles, Galshius would not be able to complete his own missions. But Eiga says that they did not understand. The first step of the training is to make everyone want to participate. In summary, the motivation to fight is the same as building a dam. The 7 villages in that territory, and each village maintains itself in its own way. For example, he has a common problem in the flow of the river, so they will have to join to build the dam. That if they can explain a management in an easy way to understand that, the reason to fight, which is equal to the resolution of shared problems of other territories, it was a common problem, the motivation to fight, so they will be equally motivated. The boy understands that situation and that maybe Eiga is right, but asks if there is some way to do that. He says yes. The monsters that live on the west side should be eliminated. Everyone heard that the south side of the mountain because of those monsters, both east and west. So if they eliminate those monsters, people will be able to live there peacefully, and it will be possible to create new structures. At least there are many people unhappy with this current situation, so he is sure that there is a lot of motivation placed in the middle of those places. The boy says that most people cannot fight. How could they defeat those monsters? That is why Eiga is specialized in training the low-level monsters of the West, with a double experience in the future among 2,500 people they could train around. 150. Eiga will show him all the he learned in the group of the miraculous. Then they will soon be able to fight. Of course, 60 people will not always do the missions. That is, Eiga will make an organization with the people of the villages and wanted the priority in the matters of each village. For example, the people of that town who are almost all farmers. Soon they were omissions when the harvest season arrived. The people of the other kingdom could participate when the constructions of the dams were delayed because of the preparation of the land, and there would be dozens of people for exclusively the missions. Then it would minimize as much as possible the impact on the industry. And if they neglect the existence of the industry, they would not be strong in the long term. Eiga ended up talking too much without any breath. Then his plan for now was that, and asks if everyone could lend their own strength. That was what Eiga wanted to say now. Then someone ends up raising a hand. It was Igarashi who wanted to know more about what Eiga does. Galshiasa also says that it has been a long time since they joined, so there is no reason to back out now. Then it is true, he says, that it was alright if it does not destroy their industry, and the boy says that it was alright. Eiga ends up getting excited and says that That way tomorrow Galcius will investigate the economic situation of the territory. The priest and his son should be intermediaries between Aiga and the population. Meanwhile, Igarashi, she should be Aiga's assistant and give a clear copy of the notice board. She gets excited for that job, and so it was fun. That feeling makes Chio remember someplace, and he ends up remembering quickly. It was like in the early days of his previous group. We go back 3 years in the past where someone was calling the name Yuri, asking where he is, if he was alright. It was number 1 who asked him to answer quickly, but the boy did not answer. Then she shouted to all the heirs. In the present time, number 1 was in a certain city that was practically impossible to remember something that happened years ago. She was not asking about 3 years, and that was what happened. She ended up separating from her own brother. I saw that someone saw her brother by that port, but when she asked someone, no one knew that person. They only wanted to know what the number 1 adventurer was doing there. Anyway, with a crowd. Then they wandered around her, and soon she asks everyone if no one saw someone similar to her brother. But at that moment lately, it was being very tiring. She could not find anything useful. The only good thing was to find Aiga again, and that thing, she really needs to do her now. Anyway, life is not always good for everyone. She ended up finding good companies everywhere. She stopped, but with whom she really wants to be prefer, and get another path. And it is serious. Her brother was also in a similar situation. Then she stands up saying that she could not keep postponing her own missions anymore, because she is the number 1 swordswoman, and if she keeps traveling around someday, she will find her own brother in a giant forest on some continent. She ends up flying to that place. She thinks that that place was what the guild people were talking about, a mission that would be easy for her to help some giant monsters. These monsters are 3 times bigger than the normal ones. They are stronger, and even for adventurers who are in intermediate ranking, people said that they asked a young first, but he seemed to be training, and which was not good. Then she decided to solve the situation. Those giant monsters are still bigger than they said, which was a problem. Soon she heard a scream. It was the voice of an adventurer who might have arrived before her. Arriving there, she sees a boy who was destroying a giant monster. But the huge explosions, and that ends up drawing her attention. It was not just a child. It was a boy who had a future with magic. Those giant monsters are not easy to bring down. Their number was considerably reduced after a wave of attack, with sharp spears that pierce the enemies themselves. She wonders if using fire attack of that amount will make him be alright, but soon the boy ends up getting tired and falling with everything on the ground. After getting up, she approaches asking if he does not need help. The boy ends up looking closely at her and quickly remembers his own brother. She wonders what is wrong with her. Even if 3 years passed, then her brother should be much bigger. First, that the faces are not so similar, and the hair color are completely different. And the boy asks who she is. And soon, she introduces herself as the number 1 swordswoman, and he is obviously startled. It was correct. She heard that someone was training with a mission around there, so she came to help. Soon the shameless boy telling her to stay away from there, because it is his prey, and saying that she was very annoying too. But right behind him something was happening, so he took an attack. The girl said that it was her turn, but soon the boy asks to wait. He will be the number 1 of that world. Then he ends up casting magic, a huge fireball that ends up pushing away the huge monsters. And that number 1 says that it was incredibly huge, a high-level explosive magic of quality. But soon she asks to wait. If he intends to launch that mission, he himself will be caught by the explosion. But he says releases his final explosion, which creates a huge crater in the ground through the child that distance. And so she ends up taking him to a distant place to heal the child and help what was needed. Looking at him now, he does not even look like the young adventurer who judged me and annihilated the giant monster. But he looks like a small girl sleeping. Soon he starts to wake up, caressing her belly. Number 1 asks if the boy likes her belly so much. And so he wakes up getting embarrassed, standing up, apologizing for what happened. She says that there is no need to worry. He is a boy at his own age. It is not strange, so even to go to a body in a bikini armor. But it was not that. So they end up saying goodbye because the boy says that he needed to go back. And so she asks if he does not want to make a group with her. She said yes. Leak until then cannot go back. The boy apologizes, but he needs to go back to the teacher, and he also says that he respects his teacher a lot, so he apologizes, but there is no need to worry. Soon, at that moment, now another asks if she is number 1, and soon he will be number 1 in the future. Then he will allow her to do some missions with him. He was a cheeky boy, but he had to go now, so he says, bye. But soon she says one last little thing. He knows, if not from 0, his name, he will never know who he is. So in case then he becomes number 1, he will not know if it was true. Then he says that he is a dangerous mage called Moriel Extreme, At that moment, Iga was in his land, analyzing that Igarashi was very intelligent for everything she was doing. Igarashi ends up thanking for that, and Iga does not know a way to make a language to the extreme west. So, thank God he was happy to have her by his side. Iga asked Igarashi to write the bulletin boards for him and to place one in each village. The village chiefs would then know about the existence of Iga and would come to understand what he wanted to do. But soon, someone caught Iga's attention. It was the wife of the priest's son. She apologized for interrupting, but Iga had a delivery, and the armaments had finally arrived. Iga had requested some weapons and armor to equip the units he wanted to organize with the chiefs, and soon he asked the lady if she could help take those things to the room. But there was a problem with that, as the amount was quite large for the room. It happened that Iga had broken many of them in his excitement. He simply could not leave all of that with the priest's family for long, so he did not know what to do. At that moment, Igarashi said that Iga needed his own mansion. After all, he was the owner of the place, and he truly needed a mansion. But he did not know what to do to build one. Then the priest appeared, saying he should talk a bit with the carpenters and the masters of the village. Iga said he was very grateful to the priest, and asked if it would cost a lot of money. Well, clearly it would not be for free. Iga's retirement had been 22 million. Now he had 12 million in the bank, and 3 million in hand, which made a total of 15 billion. All of this was Galshia's fault. Soon the priest said that if Iga could pay properly, it would be very quick, and since he was the new owner of that place, it was time to call that a loan. It was time to start building his mansion. Then a month passed, and Iga said that everything was fine. He decided to build the mansion in the south-central part of the island. This happened for many reasons. One of them being because it was most convenient to be close to the monsters' territory, since they would soon be subdued. The main construction was still ongoing, so Iga would come from time to time to see how it was progressing. In addition, part of the house was already built, and he thought it was incredible. Normally, he would enter that dojo simply to lie on the ground and see what was going on. It was all very quiet, and he was very happy with it, but now he should use that construction for something. Soon, someone arrived at that moment. It was Chio, who caught Iga's attention. She approached him because they had met again after a long time. She was a transport leader and earned her living from culture. Soon, Iga said that meant she was transporting wood for his mansion. Chio was surprised to discover that the place was Iga's house, and that he was the new owner who had been announced on the bulletin boards. She had read it as well. Iga had become the new leader of that realm. He wanted everyone to work together to put an end to the Western monsters to develop the country. Those boards were spread across the center of the 7 villages. Chio was glad she had been tricked in such a way. Iga apologized for that. Then she soon read about his intention to eliminate the monsters. And indeed, it was true. Iga said he would like her to fight as well, since she had the talent of a warrior. But she was startled, saying she could not do that, as there was no possibility she had any such talent. She only knew how to teach and carry planks. Fighting monsters was too much for her. Yes, the other villagers would probably react the same way if told they suddenly had some kind of hidden talent, but no one would believe him, even if they all acted together. Chio still would not do it in any case, not even in her wildest dreams. Iga then said he had an amazing idea, and he called her into the dojo, asking if she knew the basics of awakening a talent, that she only needed to challenge herself to reveal her true form. He could help others awaken, as that was one of Iga's special abilities. Then he ended up using possession. Only shamans could use that kind of ability, and with proper permissions, they could freely control souls for limited time and distance. Iga could not use a high-level version of that technique. It was only an imitation. It only allowed the soul to go in a straight line toward the objective. This could awaken her hidden abilities immediately and let her reach intermediate levels depending on the situation. When Iga possessed someone with a warrior's talent like Chio, then when using different martial arts styles, the body would end up memorizing them. Then Iga's soul would leave her body, and she would simply practice those skills on her own multiple times until prepared. This ability was more effective than Iga had expected. With it, he had already helped everyone awaken their powers earlier. But there were 2 disadvantages. First, Iga could not help people stronger than himself, so after a while it would become useless to them. Second, there were some limitations when he was in possession state. The target needed to stay still. Both had to be in a calm place, and most importantly, the other person needed to agree. People were afraid of possession or ghostly things like that. Thinking about it, Iga was a foreigner who had suddenly become lord of that place, mobilizing people with Chio to destroy the monsters. This could seem irrational to anyone, so before she believed in Iga, she should believe in her own land. The people there were full of incredible talents, and he bet everyone had potential. She was the first to have the required qualities. Then he kneeled, asking her to cooperate. Holding back a little, Chio laughed, saying that since he was the new owner of the place, he should not be a coward begging her like that. Soon, she said it would be an honor to work with Iga, so she ended up accepting. Iga prepared for possession and asked her to stay quiet. Soon his possession touched her body, and she began to feel strange and afraid. But it was all right. She soon felt the soul entering her body. Something was happening, and she screamed with all her strength as the possession finally entered. After holding on, she was asked how she felt, which was difficult to describe. They decided to rise slowly, and her body stood up. The movement of a female body was a little different, as her breasts were heavy, not to mention the bandages, making it hard to breathe easily. Chio could hear Iga's thoughts, and apologized for that. Now she was to focus on how she felt. Soon after throwing a few punches, she was memorizing, and then he asked her to try on her own. Her first time shouting made it a bit funny, as she had to tighten her stomach, brace her elbows, lock her hips, and then punch. She began doing it several times. After they got quite tired that afternoon, Iga said she had strong muscles, but she still did not feel confident. Then it was time to see how much she had learned that day. After placing the dummies in front of her and training a bit, she managed to destroy them all with just one punch, which made her very happy, saying she had finally done it. Iga then explained she needed to keep practicing, and she said it was all fine. So she decided to leave, saying she would see letters later. And if things went on like that, she would be able to truly fight. But at that moment, back home, Igarashi was right behind Iga, and Galshia said he was smiling a lot, and that he had returned very late, but that he had not done anything, and asked Igarashi to stop that. Soon after, Galshias's investigations revealed more information about the territory for Iga. Soon he spoke with Igarashi, saying that her grandfather had recently awakened magic. She explained that she had not been home for some time, so she was not so sure. Then they decided to go to the village to check physically. The grandfather thanked them for taking care of his granddaughter, saying he was Igarashi's grandfather. He was 62 years old, and was the leader of seed research, having improved the quality of seeds there for many years. That grandfather was the reason for the high production in life. His destined work was producer, so it fit perfectly. He was a key factor in developing those lands. So when Iga used the fourth ability on him some days earlier, it was an ability to share experience, just like taking the old group as an example. On a mission, if only Cross, Iga, and Tiana defeated a monster while the rest were sick and had to stay back, normally only those who participated would gain experience. But since the three were marked with receivers, they would gain experience too, leveling up. They could even learn new spells while asleep. This was a new ability to develop the territory itself, and Iga could mark the most important people with combat jobs. The receiver would help them quickly increase their talents. For now, there were only 3 people. As the Lord's level increased, production magic would awaken. The variety of crops would improve a lot. Future harvests would become more stable. Soon he asked the old man if he had felt anything strange in his body. He said he felt nothing, as expected. Iga had to gain more experience, otherwise they would not feel anything significant. Then Igarashi appeared, saying it was time. The 25 chosen were gathered. The composition was as follows: 3 support mages, 3 healers, 10 attackers, 7 swordsmen, 2 archers, and 1 warrior. There was a reason for recruiting so many attack mages. Even though they were chosen, there was nothing that made them equally talented. That was why in the future they would use magic fusion to increase the group's firepower. For now, the main force depended on these people. The 7 vanguard swordsmen were supported by the support mages. The 2 healers could learn full healing in the future while using items. Next were the archers. If magic fusion became possible, they would be the ones to finish the monsters. Soon, Iga expected a lot from Chio's fighting abilities, and also from her transport capacity, since she changed this frequency. Iga intended to increase the troop numbers to 100 for various missions, and also needed to stockpile items, food, and equipment for that. The transport experience with wood carrying would be necessary, so Iga was counting on Chio in this situation. Then the training session would now begin in the forest. They went to the Western District, where situations were quite complex. The monsters were enormous, and it was very difficult. Soon, Iga asked everyone to step back and used ice offensive magic, defeating that monster at once. Everyone thought it was amazing, as expected from the owner of that place. Thanks to the blessing, those 25 people received double experience. And if they continued like that, they would all reach the required levels as quickly as possible. Iga said that if they saw a monster, they should not attack immediately but report it first. The people got angry with that, asking why. Everyone wanted to use swords and magic, and one of them had only the power of attack, only at 5. Among them only Chio had enough power for that thanks to training sessions. The others were equally weak, and he could not let them face the monsters directly now. Iga asked everyone to be a little patient, and that they should not fight a monster face to face now, and, understanding that situation, Iga was there, defeating all the monsters at once. It had been quite a while since he had had fun while fighting, so even if the opponents were low-level monsters, still, it was a kind of new, fun situation. After a good while, they began to gain enough attack power, and now he asked everyone to finish off the monsters for good, and everyone was very excited about that. They decided to fight directly. Even though it was difficult, still some of them managed to defeat some monsters, which made everyone excited for it. It was as Iga thought. They could let the first one finish them off. Now it was to see the archers not lose to anyone, and everyone wanted to be in front of each other. After one person achieved success, the others would start thinking that they could also do it. As long as they were confident, they would get results. And so they were so focused on that it was time to leave. Even so, some people still wanted to hunt a few more, and they had just gotten a chance to prove themselves. The monsters get stronger at night, and they were not strong enough for that. So Iga ended up warning that Chio defeated more monsters. Next, one of the villagers noticed that there was one missing and decided to run. But that guy wanted to kill at least one. However, a huge monster was right behind him, and everyone shouted for the protagonist, because it was the monster from that morning that was very powerful. The boy had suffered an attack. He had many burns, but even so, he was alive, so they should take him to the healing mages. The toad was more aggressive, and Iga could expel the magical mucus from its skin, and the defense was also increasing significantly. Soon everyone asked Iga to save it, but he said it was not the time. They should defeat it together. Chio said that her punches did not cause any damage, but this was the time to do it together. First, they would have to destroy it at a specific point. The support mages and Iga would be the list for that. After that, the archers would shoot at the toad's vision. Then the people, the trees, the mages would use spells that he had ended up showing them, and of course they would not deal much damage, only to make it think the enemy was on top. Then it would show its own belly, and it could not expel mucus from the belly. Then it was time for the people to go all in and defeat the monster from below. Having done that, everyone started to get excited, being happy with their own achievements, and everyone working together was very good. The young man ended up thinking about himself. But Iga said that with so much fifth from here, that was it. That training was still a success, but with everyone's sides, everything would get much better. Everyone's attack power increased in a single day, and with that they would continue in order to become stronger, and everyone began to raise their arms. That night, Igarashi's grandfather ended up approaching, happy that they were arriving alive. Igarashi's grandfather said that he could now do incredible things, and thanks to the receiver, today's battle experience was also transferred to the old folks, and he probably leveled up very quickly. It was production of magical power, and if he put it on the bald head, he could also make a strand of hair grow. Igarashi ended up pulling the old man home, but that was very cool. Now that he knew how to do that, he could use it for productivity matters later. Next, Ega was suffering a lot, asking what was wrong with someone. It was a horse that was throwing him down all the time. That was the black horse that the chief ended up giving to Iga. The owner has to have his own for his profession of the territory. But soon Igarashi said that the horse was not being nice. It was extraordinary, and the responsibility was to help Iga. But that was a very naughty horse in the end, now that the summer harvest occupation had passed. Despite the strength of the territory itself, people were excited about everything that was happening. Iga recruited more than 50 people, and now the subjugation team had 75 members, and he was doing very well. Even though 75 people are part of a large team, there are still some problems. As they chase the monsters on their own, they end up arguing, and it was hard to keep everything in order when the horse threw him down. Dealing with this horse was so tiring that even the same people noticed. And so the same monsters appeared, and they were quickly defeated. The powers of up to that, everyone rose to more than 700, and that was good. The archers rise to 800 the stats. The first 25 members are very impressive now, especially the support mages, who mastered several spells. The attack power of just one person increases so much the defense of the entire group, and with the larger team, the spell is much greater. The longer the time, the more effective the spell is. The one who had grown the most, obviously, was Chio, who comes up to Iga asking if he must be exhausted Jera just to leave the rest to her. The The attack power rose from 120 to 1,256. Today's intention was to check the situation of the western part of the territory, and thus they could become stronger than even Aga going to the lower western territory. There they were walking with the old woman, who says that it has been half a century that she has been riding a horse with someone. According to the old woman, even 3 mountains are called Hanayama, Kanayama, and Motoyama. The first has poor soil that is almost unproductive. It is hard for anything to grow there. Then they are arriving, noticing that there was a cave nearby, from which a wind came out from inside for an hour. Soon, I ask the ladies if she knows anything, but not exactly. She only remembers that the relatives said earlier not to get close, because it could collapse. So that cave had been there for a long time. Iga thinks of going later to check what was happening. While they return, Galcius arrives, warning that there is a guest around. It was a swordsman who had been sent by the neighboring lord. Galcius says that I met by chance when he did the inspection in the nearby cities, and it seems that they needed assistance in the end. Iga asks why the lord said that the short ones need his help. So sword. In the end, it was to help get rid of the giant monkeys that exist in their lands. The rumors about the city had recently reached the neighboring land's lord, and it was to lend assistance. That was a mission and a first expedition. Iga thought a bit about it, but would change the answers in 2 days. Thus the swordsman went away, and soon they asked Galcius why he was very happy about it. But in his opinion, it would be very good to have a friendly relationship with the neighboring lord. It was an attraction there. The strength of the neighboring lord is embargo constructions, and ship constructions are very important. When Iga manages to connect the guild with the missions, maybe then later he will need one more time. If some group of adventurers appears on that island and finds out about it, it will be a huge mess, and they need to take the mission to finish first. That was certain, but those giant monkeys are hard to defeat, and everyone had that in mind. The giant monkeys are a class of god monsters. A horde usually consists of intermediate class monkeys. So it was time to call those monkeys medium monkeys. At our current pace, they will need at least a year and a bit, or even more than that. That was very powerful. If they accept that mission, the people can get hurt. They can even suffer losses. Right after, Igarashi decides to tell Iga to deal with them himself. But he did not know. However, something shines in his head. Even though he was weaker than the previous group, he was still a mid-level adventurer. And that was what Igarashi wanted to say. That he should describe to the neighboring lord and gather all forces, but that was their first decision. A few days later, they went to the north of the territory, and there they arrived in the land of ships, whose population was 50,000 times greater than that of Iga's island. Arriving there in the territory, the people ended up welcoming them, saying that the giant monkeys had been causing many problems, and that it was to lend Iga's power. It was a magnificent castle there, a beautiful view, and the docks are works of art. He asks right after if they want to build some steamship, and those people did want that, but they did not find the magical ores in their own land. The magical ore was rare, which has magical powers and is used to obtain 3 inches steam visa, and that circulate through the imperial city. They have advanced technology about ships, which was a shame to lose. The next day they were gathering, preparing to fight against the giant monkey. The transport team had arrived, and soon they would help Iga in the fight, and thus it was time to prepare for a battle. As previously said, that was their first expedition. They should stay alert to everything that was happening and keep their spirit active. People were talking there, and Iga asked everyone to respect him, but he simply gets lost. But he needs to consider some training points for the future, because he would be sure that they had those previous thoughts, and this cannot be something that will happen one day. But still they have to obey, because he being scary will not help them get strong. In short, if they see the giant monkey, it was not to fight without warning Iga first, and if it is medium monkeys, they should work together to deal with them. Now everyone was strong, and perhaps they could leave the boss to themselves. But it was something that could not happen. The monkey begins to fall from the sky right behind him, and after they got scared, the monkey screams with everything. And it was a medium monkey too. In the end, it is an order begins to appear. Iga asks everyone to stay calm and get ready. They are in panic because of the surprise attacks, and it seems that on some days, the monkeys exploded. The territories have 8 monkeys in total. The enemy's strength was dispersed because they were running in all directions, so it was to calm down, observe the situation, and right after that, the group gathers in the middle of one. They are 75 against 8 of them, so there is no reason to be afraid. They could easily finish off one simply by working together, and after preparing, then they come with everything. Their great expressions were coming, and it was to show the fruits of hard work. After a while, everyone begins to attack. First with magic on top of the monkeys. Afterward, the swordsmen attack, and thus the defenders end up defending the stone of monkeys that were coming, and the archers make the final shot. It was an amazing teamwork that was coming from everyone. If they continue like this, the battle would end soon. Now Aiga's group would need to move away from the group and face the boss. But there was something wrong. The horse was also not obeying Carlo's orders in the end. So he was there, and thus the giant monkey appears. That giant monkey had already destroyed 3 villages, killed hundreds of people, and was like a giant mountain that was moving. Its arms were like tsunamis, destroying everything in its path, and the mouth releases a mysterious beam of intense heat that sends even the death of many soldiers. And that monster was a giant monkey that everyone was watching while Aiga fought it. The last boss had appeared, and the horse got scared, throwing Aiga hard to the ground and trying to flee, but the monkey looks directly at the horse. And when the horse runs away, the monkey runs after it with everything. Everyone was in trouble with that situation, so Aiga decides to use his accelerate ability. He is running after them. But something was starting to get strange. The horse suddenly stopped, and everyone started to ask what was happening to it. So maybe it had a stomachache or something like that. But at that moment it was enough to look at the mouth of the giant monkey, that it was releasing a very strong power. Aiga was arriving, and if he asks to employee in time and uses the shield at the maximum power he could, and so when the monkey releases its power with everything, the shield ends up protecting the personnel. But soon after it breaks, the people ask if they are okay, and somehow yes, and the one who was there in front, standing, was Aiga with his arm completely broken. That was hurting a lot, and he managed to protect everyone for a while, but he did not expect to be seriously injured like that. Thus he begins to laugh, saying that Cross would have done better than that or not. None of them could kill that giant monkey, because they were not there. So Aiga throws himself as weak, thus everyone asks to retreat, and that they should not stay there. They are grateful for Aiga's assistance, but they should leave the rest to the leader of those lands. Everyone seems kind of reasonable, but he has to save Aiga first. They could do this together, at least do this together. But at that moment Igarashi says she was volunteering, but it was not that. They do not need to retreat because Aiga will be able to do something. The monkey throws a punch with everything, and thus they begin to get lost, then asking what could have happened. But the monkey looks forward and quickly begins to get scared. It was pitiful that they were seeing Aiga in such a pathetic state, and that they were probably disappointed that way. But then he would show that beginner monster the skill of a formed intermediate adventurer. He had defended the monkey's blow with everything, and thus his hand began to shine, using intermediate fire magic, attacking the monkey with everything, which tried to defend itself at that moment. But it was already too late. It took an attack to the face and thus tried to retaliate, but it was already too late. Aiga was right behind it, jumping with everything and holding his sword, improving well on the monkey's forehead, and finishing with a single blow of his. Aiga realizes that he was supposed to show off his lord to everyone, but there was no way. The people were all kneeling before Aiga, who, to be honest, everyone was a little disappointed right now. It was as they thought, but in fact Aiga was really very strong, and if they began to raise letters upwards, and Igarashi is happy when everything was happening. After all that fight, they decided to go to the temple to celebrate everything that was happening at that time, and thus, Aiga was on the bridge, saying that everyone seemed happy because a party happened. Nicoli and Galcius were working on the documents of future business contracts, respectively. The chosen team received a lot of experience, and the monsters have a much higher value than in Aiga's territory. Thanks to the mention of Cut, everyone received a doubled amount of experience, from the giant boss and the medics as well. In addition, especially notable was Chio's attack power, which rose to 1,900. The attack power of the 25 chosen people surpassed 1,000 with respect to the learned spells. Not one of the support mages learned the animate spell, which increases the attack power of the personnel over the archers due to the increase in skill and range. They could use distance angle tactics. Someday they will be able to grow strong even without Aiga. They still think that Aiga's intermediate skills are impressive and could even understand them a little. Then soon after, Aiga meets the leader of those lands and asks why he is not down there celebrating with everyone. But in fact, he was really appreciating Aiga's assistance. He should disturb the relaxed atmosphere down there, so it was better this outside style. His words made Meets realize something. The more he is the owner of the areas, the more he knows Chio and the rest of the personnel. Everything he can do as owner is to take a step back and watch them grow, and needs to govern them in the right generation for a connection between the two. Guy there looks and gives a hi to Aiga, deciding to give a hi again. So that was what being an owner means. A few days later, they return to Aiga's lands, and a lord welcomes him. Aiga thanks the priest for having taken care of things during his absence, and also he will rest. The priest said that it was completed and that he could finally see his house. The place was huge, and thus it was a habitual lifestyle. They did some research on that. A huge bed, an amazing bathing place. Then there was Galshias to talk to Aiga about the ships. It was decided that they will give 3 ships that carry 50 people each. A crew for the ships will be dispatched for now, and it was very well done on Galshias' part. It will probably take a few months for them to arrive. And it is at the end of summer that they would be busy preparing the harvest anyway, so the only thing they could do was fight. Iga had a lot of work to do, and someone was there outside watching Iga from a distance. Soon they go to a western cave, and Iga was talking, asking what they think was in that cave. As the family was saying, they work with engineering. It was to say what they think of that cave. The boy says it looks strange. They were trying to investigate the cave that was shown, and there were some grooves on the ground that Iga decides to take a look at. The boy says he does not know anything about that place, and as amateurs they should not try anything. The risk of only was very big. The boy could build a defense, but he would not know if that would work. Iga says that he understands him. Anyway, the boy says that they should also get out of there quickly, and they speak regarding something that was happening inside the cave. There were several people looking at them, so because of that, they decide to run out of the cave. Returning home, Igarashi ends up receiving Iga, saying that he has a visitor. It was a woman, and Iga apologizes for leaving her waiting. The girl says it was a pleasure to meet, and came to interview Iga. She is a reporter of the Adventurer King. Iga asks why they are doing this to him. In reality, she knows a lot about Iga. He is 1.78 tall, weighs 80 kilograms, is 27 years old. He smokes cigarettes. Former member of the 5 Miracles, and that serves even his full name. Now he is retired and became the owner of the land, and leads his people to ensure the Great Monkey. Iga asks how she knows so much about him. In fact, she is called a fan of intermediate adventurers, and after a tea, they decide to talk about her hobby, who was in charge of the session of beginner and intermediate adventurers. She is someone who cares more about the rise of average adventurers than about famous high-level ones. After a few questions, she found out that she had been a fan of Cross's group for 4 or 5 years, but she is only of intermediate adventurers. When they started to get famous, maybe her passion would cool down. She decides to hold Iga's wall to realize that his training skills are wonderful. He can see that the group needed each movement instantly. She discovered the appropriate talent for each one, placing them in position and keeping the group balanced with management skills. Only someone with a specific long-term vision could see this kind of thing. Moreover, Iga's training was full of love. It flows through each person in the group and constantly leads them to new levels. He is always there at the right moments to show what the group needs. She ends up understanding Iga very well, and he seems very happy, and Iga ends up wondering what was happening. In fact, Iga says that he cannot keep up with the group with the skills, so they are not that useful, only that the woman ends up saying that he was wrong. Without Iga, the heroes group could never reach the top of the world, and that he was the best. Iga ends up denying it, and he is certainly happy with all that. Igarashi ends up approaching, saying that it was time. Then the woman asks if he has any more commitments, and he says that I have to explore the territory, among other things. So it was time to finish the interview and take her with Iga. They decide to end up helping each other in this case. Iga asks if she really will want to write about the territory. In fact, it was not that, but that territory will gradually become famous, so they should interview them quickly. They go to the western forest in the monster hunting zone, and the girl is happy to see that it was there that his people trained to increase their own level. But they are the chosen ones, and the current skills are a little above beginner adventurers. They are divided into groups of 6 people and are giving support to each one. There are approximately 150 people working together to defeat the boss, and she felt that she needed to write about this. To be recognized by the guild and be able to take a mission, they need the public's approval first. Because Iga cannot say that they can kill monsters and came to give a mission, the guild would not accept it. But with public opinion and mission by territory, that starts to get much more interesting, and the guild will not be able to ignore them. So maybe that small interview could help the territory. Iga started taking the girl through the whole area and showed the protection of the Chosen and the missions that were happening around there. This here was also getting dark, so he asks if I would like to go back to the mission and rest a bit. Soon she asks if Iga would be returning as well. In fact, he says that he needs to build a good reputation in all the villages, so he was going to join the people to visit the other places. She asked to go along with Aga. It was as she thought. While she collected data she did not understand. That island was really a wonderful land. Man then stands perplexed, even knowing it was rude. Kept thinking that it is true that with Aiga's ability, that land was originally a rural land, and it is poor to the eastern terms of the world changed a lot. But, and other areas with Aga, he would be sure he could transform them too. But for honesty, they do not know why he chose that place. She is a reporter, so she should go with Aiga until she understands that situation. Iga says it was alright, so they decide to go to that place. There is nothing wrong with her at that moment, but I want always believed in the ability that spoke the truth. So there are some lands behind that. Returning to the farther island, the Lord says that that land was quite prosperous. And when he was young, the population was decreasing day by day. Maybe it is because there is no industry in those rocky lands. But that is strange. The reporter asks who could prosper in such a place. They do not have a village chief. There are only 4 families left, one of 11 people, then of 8, then of 4, and then of 9 people. And Aiga went on introducing each family, and also used the eyes of the gods. The children are support mages, one of attack, others vanguard and spearmen respectively. Aiga believes that they will increase the population and do their best so that village does not disappear. But the largest family has 11 people. They decide to visit to take a look at how it was happening. A lady ends up receiving them and welcomes Aiga. It is that he was the new owner of that island, and he is so young and talented, and she was also completely in favor of killing monsters. That is why there is a direct request to Aiga to take that useless person and take him with him. His name was Akira, and he was around there. The woman says he is her brother, but he has never worked, and ends up giving many costs to the people. Aiga decides to take a look, and observes the destined occupation of miner that he has. The job is not suitable for an adventurer. It was already getting very late, so the woman suggests they gather together soon. The reporter asks to agree to stay. The children were starting to like her, so there was not much to do. Soon they ask about the priest, how he could go. He said that it is very dangerous to travel at night, so as everyone agreed to stay, they decide to have a party and eat well. At that moment, Aiga realizes that Akira is not a person who communicates much. Because of that, he cannot work with the whole village, but for a lazy person he was also very muscular. That village was richer than people thought. The houses are quite large, and they are well dressed and with varied meals, so he wonders what people do there to live. They work with hunters in the mountains and other villages, then buy fangs that they hunted, and thus they process the meat and divide it by or the fur and sell to the other villages. In the past, there were many more people, and that was the only bad business. They would not be able to support a very large community to survive in that village. The woman does a lot of things, and is not very sure. But that was strange. Something was different from normal. And the next day, Aiga would investigate that. When he wakes up, Akira was no longer there. As bad as before, Aiga realizes that something was different. And soon the woman wakes. She explains that the boy was digging a hole, and Aiga asks what it was. No one knows, but that he was just ending up digging a hole. He always likes and thinks he will earn something in the middle of that kind of thing. So Aiga decides to follow that guy to see what was happening. While he follows, the boy was with tools preparing to dig a wall, and he was picking up several tools in succession. The sound changed. Aiga does not know much about that, but it seems that he changes tools and the force used depending on the rock layer. A professional he was, even an amateur could say that. However, no matter how talented he is, no one will need him being useless. He was worthless, and even his family thinks that way, and there is no place to stay. Aiga ends up seeing himself in that situation, seeing that it was similar. He soon approaches the boy, asking if he is going to want to take a break. Scared, he lowers the head, kneeling, asking for forgiveness, but Aiga says it was alright, and that he was really bad at socializing, that he was not to worry. Then Aiga ends up giving him a cigarette, and the two end up smoking together. It had been a long time since the boy had smoked, so he also ends up alcoholic drinks for him. It had also been a long time since the boy had talked to someone, and after drinking for a while, he stopped being so closed and began to speak openly. And soon he talks to Aiga about the purpose, if he was asking about that village in the past. Aiga would like to know what people were doing to seem so prosperous, but it is that he heard from his grandfather while he was small, so he decides to take to a path. It was a hole in the wall, a cave. Those grooves are the same as the Western Cave. The people used to mine there, but the ores ran out, and the number of people began to decrease. So Aiga was beginning to understand the problem. The boy learned that from his own grandfather and does not know what it is called, but he left that it was a magical ore. And the reporter approaches, talking about that. She had followed Aga because that was the true skill of a reporter. But anyway, that was magical ores. Soon they ask to follow each other. And so they go to a western cave. He says that that was mining, being processed to be mined, and maybe there is a chance of having precious stones there. And that was exactly what they wanted. And from that month onward, that boy will start working for Aga, and then they hope that both could work together. And they shake hands. It was as expected of Aga. The reporter says that that was amazing, that the effective communication was skillful, and also the ability to discover and work with different talents. It was more than that. The enormous potential that was dormant in the depths of that land was wonderful, that he could start mining the magical ore from now on. And it will not take long for that place to be noticed by several people. It was a great future, and that was great. The reporter asks if he does not want her to write about the magical ore, and Iga says that they have not started selling it officially yet. If other countries hear about that, they could attack. That was true, but it was a big scoop. Moreover, he was thinking of something much more interesting, asking what she thinks about exclusively about the territory from now on. Those eyes were the passionate Iga, who had always been admired. She thanks, says that she will be writing an excellent piece with that, and thanks for the help as well. And soon she asks Iga to accept something. Soon afterward, we go to the desert during a mission where the situation was complicated. The high-level monster sub threw 5 lizard men, and in that Cross was with his group, defeating everyone. But there was a problem. The fights were starting to get harder. As much as then they managed to defeat all the monsters, Deli and Cross could still remain standing. But there were many more lizard men to worry about. And behind them there was more reliable support that they could have. And, as much as they are injured, they could still continue helping everyone. The support mages were there, and Ama ends up getting completely irritated, saying that that was bad. A blast magic from the girl would be instantaneous. Their end. And soon Tiana asks to stop that. Now they are only the 4. They should focus on the monsters. Open says that that was right and that the girl will come back for sure. That place could not stop them there. A few days passed since then, and Deli was receiving his flowers as usual. He should be tired after so many recent missions. He keeps making a difficult face, and thus he goes away, realizing that he was very good at that, or else it was so hot that he could not say anything. He was also talking to him, saying that he is the least could shake the hand of the people. Deli was very popular with women, and therefore he should be more careful with the way he acts. As long as they keep cheering for him in the magazines, everyone will notice. And with that, the guild will start paying more attention, so they would be the chances of getting more high-level missions. Have understood. Says that this was certain, but he is very shy. Anyway, with the sudden disappearance of Mourier, for sure the guild will not want to let those Demon King class missions pass. But they could go through so many problems to get there, and now did not receive anything in return. They go to a bar to drink a bit. But when he gets there, several reporters were around, talking to Ama and Deli that they are from the 5 miracles. It was to say about the sudden disappearance and why Cross was trying to cover all that up. Those people are 100 times worse than what he asks now, but Tiana had said earlier not to offend the reporters and not to say anything that he will be fine. Moreover, they decide very much to ask about even this sudden appearance and what was happening to seem covered up, that kind of thing. Even if the disappearance had made the public pay attention to the group, still, it will only worsen regarding the guild's interpretation. Only at that moment, Ima had vanished from there, and she had gone away. That reporter, they were irritating, and Deli could deal with all of them. She was in the lobby there, getting ready to talk to Tiana, who was sitting at a table thinking about what she could be doing. Ama says that she was feeling very down and that she could be playing with her. But Deli was running around there, asking where Ama had already gone, and that she was not to leave him so worried like that. Ama ends up pulling Deli's hair with everything, asking him to be quiet and just look directly at Tiana and the way she was acting at that moment. Cross approaches, saying hi to her, and after greeting, she says that he did a good job. Then Cross asks how it was going with the guild. It was not good at all. They will no longer allow them to take a Demon King class mission. She is as they thought. Now they are in 9th place for a few months, and no matter how many high-ranking missions they complete, Demon King missions are usually assigned to a group that was among the top 7. Therefore, the guild cannot break the rules and assign a Whirlpool mission to a group that was in 9th place. To advance to the next level in 5 miracles, you have to have the best people. Particularly, Moore attracts a lot of attention. Even being so young, he mastered the richest attributes from 6 to the highest level. Besides that, his boy this alone lowers the group's ranking, and in fact, they say it could even lose attack power considerably. And soon, Roberta ends up remembering what the boy said, asking why they sent Iga away. He was crying, and everyone asks the boy to calm down. When Cross tries to explain, the boy says that was very selfish, and that he doesn't care about that kind of thing anymore, then decides to leave. Cross says it was as he thought. Leaving Iga was a complete mistake, and everyone knew that. But Tiana tells him to stop saying that. She says that it was true that he could no longer keep up with the group, and that was not Cross's fault, and that it was not Iga's fault either. The time when he could have fun was over, and soon they say they should leave at that moment. Only Ama says to stop a bit there. Only that at that moment, Cross asks Tiana if she considered what was said some time ago. She thought a little whether she could go out with Cross. And soon she says that they would prioritize the imminent adventure for now, and this period was very important about the boy and the other things that were happening. Now was not the time to think about that kind of thing, and soon he apologizes and thus goes away, saying goodnight. Ama ends up disappointed with that. Roberta airheaded, and he didn't notice that Iga and Tiana were dating, and soon asks if that was serious. Tiana should let the past go and go out with Cross at once. A woman would feel happy with her second favorite, that's what they say. But Deli says he doesn't think it should be like that. Everyone would be happy to be with the people they truly love. Ima ends up furious, saying that then Tiana did not go with Iga, but obviously Iga would not take her along to begin with. Iga broke up with her, and he knew he wouldn't be able to keep up with the group sooner or later. He probably did that because he would know that Tiana would want with him. That was true. Tiana is really a serious case, and she reused the retirement money to cover up. She should be waiting for Iga to take with him, but Iga never noticed that if she were not so direct. Ama says that was horrible, since everyone was not being real. But Deli says that as much as Ama was saying that, she also loved Iga a lot. Soon afterward, we return to Iga's land, where he was packing his things. Galcius asks where he was going, and Igarashi says he was on vacation. It's harvest season, so level up will be put aside at the moment. So he should take some belated summer vacation, because they are always working the same without breaks. Galcius asks if Iga is going to look for Marie, and that was exactly what he was about to do. Next they go to the port, and Iga said he would be leaving everything to the priest and to Igarashi, so they should stay calm. The priest asks Iga to return before the autumn harvest festival, and thus he goes away. The boy had disappeared from the heroes group, and that's what they got for dismissing Iga in the end. The protagonist says that it was not possible that was happening. Moore left because Iga was fired. That was very funny. If that's the reason for him to be kept, it would be so horrible. Soon afterward, Iga wonders what he should do. Thus, we go back a few years to the time when the team had only 3 people: Tiana, Cross, and Iga. They met the boy in the land where it was said that the legendary sword of adventurers was sleeping. Mori asks him if they are adventurers, and when he grows up, he will definitely become the strongest man in the world. Then he wanted to be part of their group. Iga was thoughtful. Then he says that the strongest in the world is a bit too much, and why would such an adorable maiden want to turn into a man? That is actually something difficult to explain. But then the people back there say that Mori was clinging to the adventurers and was useless. How is she going to be an adventurer if she always trembles in the worst possible way? Mori says that girls are weak. Even if they get strong, they remain weaker than men, and Iga does not think that. For example, there is a girl called Grieco who was on the rise lately. Then Iga decided to check the potential. It was like a miracle. That girl has the ability to quickly acquire all 5 magical attributes at the highest level, and he could hardly believe what he saw with his own eyes. Then Iga says that she could indeed join, and that maybe she is really the strongest of all. Mori was very happy to see that, and asked if he was asking her to join the group, but Tiana says that she was still just a child. It was to think outside the box. In the end, her hidden potential was essential for the group's future. And soon Tiana asks if she is that good, and Iga says yes, that he will take full responsibility to teach her. So it was not necessary to worry, but either she should get a little older, choose a career in life, because that age was very young. Iga understands that situation, but the promotion of talent should happen as early as possible. At that moment, her body and mind are still teachable. Training her very well would not be affected by anything bad. As much as he may be right, the world of adventurers is extremely uncertain, full of talented people, but they never succeeded in the end. Mori asks them to stop arguing, but Cross approaches saying not to worry, and if Iga said it's alright, then it was fine, and Tiana always believed in Iga. At the end of that, Aiga thanks Roberta immensely, and soon afterward asks what Mori's name is. After she introduces herself, Aiga ends up raising his hand, saying that it was a disciple to get ready to practice. They will start learning more day, and soon she asks if they will not practice with swords. And then they say that Aiga's classes are quite strict and sometimes a little perverted, then they end up training a lot. In the present time in Mori's hometown, Aiga was walking around there, saying that that place too not, but he had already heard that she would return to the hometown. In the end, Aiga went to so many places that they explored together, but still did not find any trace of Mori, and he wonders where she went. The wind was getting more and more cold, and it was time to return to his city. Before returning to his own territory in the port city, Aiga bought some household utensils and magazines. On the ship, it was an edition for adventurers, so Aiga would read that first. There was a journal where it was the new beginning for Aiga. He was in the magazine saying that he is one of the famous people of 5 miracles, started doing unbelievable things that no one expected. It was a territory where he would be exploring the undetermined potential of the lands of people with the impressive greats. Aiga is happy, then says that it is not as if he were super proud of that, but he will only read to absorb. But there was one thing there. There was an image directly of Cross and Tiana together, and Aiga gets irritated, throwing the magazine on the floor, saying that dating or not has nothing to do with adventures. Then, maybe they must have thought that the two are famous and want to enjoy. Soon they will disembark, and Aiga thinks as if he had a beetle crawling inside his own stomach. He did not know how to end that anger. Soon who approaches Aiga, asking if he was visiting again, was the woman with whom Aiga spent many millions in money. It's been a long time since the last visit, but he looks so sad. Soon she asks if he will want to stay a night, but he thinks that in fact he used all the money to buy equipment, and yes, I called a card. But he finally arrived home after a while, and thus Galcius and Igarashi end up receiving him. Aiga thanks for taking care of that place while he was away, and it seems that it was not found yet. Soon he asks if anything happened while he was away. In fact, the miner started digging the new hole in the cave they saw that day. According to him, the western cave was very dangerous to dig directly, so he is looking for new ways to mine. He also thanks Aiga, because now he feels he could be happier, and that definitely I will find the magical ore. And it was really his style in the end. The boy was working hard, and next time he should give him good wine and tobacco. Now Aiga will rest. He should eat or take a bath first. Igarashi ends up helping them, and then feels something strange, and soon the guy gets scared. He says he will take a bath first, and Galcius says that Igarashi likes to tease him, but she sees that letter he won. And thus Aiga went to take his bath, saying that it was refreshing. The fatigue after a long trip was gone, but he ends up throwing himself into the water, asking why Mori disappeared, and if maybe she was in a comfortable place, but if I could have found earlier, I wouldn't know how to face that situation. He hits the water hard, saying that she is a silly girl, and what is wrong with her? A professional adventurer should not be that way, and where did the dream of becoming the #1 in the world go? Thalia should yell at her severely next time to be hated. Maybe it's the best path to follow. He lost all his temper again and ended up tormenting himself, and there was a crow flying to the skies. Bring the head, getting scared that someone ends up arriving there. Strongest adventurer in the world. Man then asks what she would be doing in that place, and she did not expect to be found at that moment, but everything was thanks to that. She takes something out of her shorts, undresses casually that way, right? Like then greeting these people like that, in that way? But she takes a magazine near the column that had an interesting story about Aiga. So she ended up following around there by luck. She ended up noticing and stopping in her city. She cares a lot about what she writes. It was sincerity, but now she understands. It was certainly what she was determined to do after rejecting her. Aiga asks why she appeared out of nowhere in his bath, and soon she asks if he will want her to take off her armor. Aiga ends up arguing, saying that he really will want to do that kind of thing. Aiga ends up leaving his bath and gets worried about what was happening. Igarashi was there, and he asks what happened. She says that he has a new guest, and right at that moment she hears a noise and decides to see who was there. But at that moment Aiga said that his man's intuition was saying that something bad might happen if Igarashi finds out about the #1 adventurer. So he says that there is a cat around there that just jumped. Then he says that it is more important to ask who the guest is that time and that they should greet them as quickly as possible. A villager, maybe the woman from the magazine, but she says that it is a person she has never seen before. So Aiga decides to take a look and apologizes for the delay. But who was there was Mori. He ends up getting startled, and soon remembers that the Gale ended up finding out because of the magazine, so there is no way for Mori not to manage. So it was to act as planned, to reprimand the girl, but he ends up giving her a pat, getting very happy that she was okay. But she apologizes for what happened. Later that night, Galcius ends up meeting Mori, saying that she was very cute, and so there was another guest too, there was the number one adventurer who arrived just a little while ago, and soon she saw Mori there and ends up getting quite startled. And Aiga realizes that they already know each other. After they play around a lot and things get a little more tense, the adventurer ends up hugging Mori, and so Aiga draws Igarashi's attention, asking her to send that letter, and says that he is sure that this should be right. In the end, they end up spending a few days there to eat, and it has already been a few days since the number one adventurer and Mori came to Aiga's land, and it seems that Mori was liking that place and also does not intend to run away. It seems that the adventurer also likes that place. They end up helping each other with food on the cheek or something like that. It seems that the strongest person in the land is sometimes a little airheaded too. The youngsters nowadays were so used to her, and soon afterward Igarashi appears. The magic bulletin arrived. This technique of sending a short message of less than 20 words on a piece of paper coming from far away ended up arriving at that moment. So the autumn harvest was initiated. The red and yellow colors were spreading throughout the territory, and the harvest festival will be held on the next day. Soon afterward, the adventurer was at the top of the mountain and called Aiga up there for him to arrive at the right time if she was planning something there, and Aiga asks why his help was necessary. That, firstly, he is not going to do any muscle training. She says that maybe it is time to go back to adventuring. But she is visiting too. Aiga asks that she should return to real life. It was the right thing to do. Even if she is strong like that, it is still difficult to remain number one if she slacks off day after day. Soon she says that he is right, so she has a favor to ask of Aiga, asking if she could have Mori accompanying her. He had already imagined that it would happen. As she is number one in that world, she could help that young one to get high-level missions and even Demon King level. And in the future, she also thought of being his wife. But he never thought it would get to that. Then Aiga ends up thinking, and says that if she wants to go together with her, there will be no reason to disagree. But he says that it is quite difficult. It is a matter of social position. She is an exceptional magic swordsman, and also she has a very good offense regarding fencing, and she can handle the enemies as well while boss fights. Her skills already include the role of an offensive mage like Mori, and she can do all that very well alone. But she says that two people could do it very quickly, and she is still much stronger compared to Mori, even if she joins harder missions. It will still be difficult for her to fully develop with her own skills. She should understand that too, because she was rejected, and more love and care for Mori is necessary. But it seems that there is something else she has misunderstood. Then the girl asks to be alone for a while. Iga ends up editing and says that the number one in the world, who seems to have achieved her own dreams, but now seems to have a great sadness kept in her heart. Iga says that there is nothing better than the harvest festival ends up arriving, and everyone ends up getting ready for the harvest. The places are very beautiful, shops too. That was the first time that Mori would be participating in that, in a more eastern region festival, so no wonder she appears so happy. In the end, the way the two were very unconcerned, they return to the sanctuary, and there are the conferences of the village chiefs. They talk about the extermination of the beasts on the west side, that the children spoke a lot about that, and asked if Iga defeated them all. It was difficult to track all the minor activities and beasts, so Galcius approached saying that they were to stay calm, thanks to the synergy between the villages. The number of beasts decreased significantly compared to before, and their forces are growing more and more. So they were to remember that moment when they dragged the giant monkey that the whole army was giving up. Then even a boat was lent. Now it was Aiga's turn. The world-famous magazine mentioned them, that the place was now perfect, and it was now. With that, they will be able to negotiate with the guild to take bigger missions, and if successful, the name will shock the whole world. Everyone is happy about that. And soon Aiga successfully created a great motivation for everyone. The meetings were really quite tiring. And in the distance, Aiga was seeing Mori show the children the magics, creating explosions, fireworks, and that was really wonderful. Aiga looks at that, saying that it was really Anastasio that was the first thing to teach Mori. He teaches to enchant, and also a ball of magic. No matter how long the incarnations, every time you learn a magic with enthusiasm, he is happy to see Mori learning and improving too. In the past, he used to tire his eyes at night to study, but elemental magic was never used to teach when Mori was 13, actually 14. He stopped saying that he is going to become a man, and there were no more magical skills he could teach. But she always wanted to practice as quickly as possible. Aiga would not be able to go against that sincerity, so he should teach how to control magic like a professional. Soon afterward, what catches Aiga's attention at that moment was Mori, who runs to hug him, and soon he asks what happened. But that one received that from that friend, and not only will know how to fly, it was a bamboo helicopter. Aiga then ends up teaching a little how to do it just with his hands, and that makes the children go very happy. Soon afterward, Mori says that it was just in time that he managed that. It would shock everyone. They end up walking, and thus it was getting darker and darker. The festival was very fun. The #1 adventurer said that now she could do some muscle festival to help the people who are weaker currently. Thus he looks back, saying to no one what he needed to talk about, but he said that he would not go back at all. Soon afterward, Aiga ends up getting startled, asking the child to listen, but he says that he would stay there because Aiga was her master, so there was not much to do besides teaching them. He ends up laughing, saying that he knows that there is not much to teach. However, Aiga says that he would feel guilty for that kind of thing and would not say to stay with the group either, but that was not what she wanted. Honestly, she was being very kind, and there were no other things to do but to appreciate. He ends up crying and asks her to listen directly. She wanted to be #1, so she would have to stay with the group, and it was the only way to grow quickly, to gather much more experience. She asks if Aiga will return, but it is that he also has no other place to come, so he was also expelled anyway. He does not feel guilty for himself, but it was not just that. He will do what he wants, simply like the old times. Then he should promise that she could stay like that. But she said that it is not that. Aiga gets startled because she has never helped that way before and asks what happened. After trying to speak for a long time, he looks closely at the girl but cannot say anything else. She asks to forget all that, so they return home. Soon she says that the others may be very angry with her for having run away, and she feels guilty too for all those things. Aiga says that everything will be fine until she apologizes, then points to see who was there. It was Tiana who was at a distance watching them return. For a while they hold back, but Aiga asks her to move forward, and thus Tiana goes forward with everything to hug the girl, apologizing for keeping all that as a secret. And thus she apologizes, and Aiga just keeps watching. Soon afterward he asks Igarashi if she could prepare a bath. It was very late, so they will stay here the whole night. Then at that moment Aiga was in his hall, and Igarashi then takes the opportunity to come and warn that they were all taking a bath. He thanks, and was just to listen to the sounds of laughter among other things. Then they end up sharing a drink. Aiga the head asking if she was always that way, and as soon as she returns, it is the heroine #1 that she was covered in sweat as well. But it was difficult. The festival was very complicated too, and now she was hungry. She asks if there is something to eat, and soon Aiga says that they need to tidy up some things. And soon afterward Igarashi asks if everything is okay, and she says that the bathroom was occupied, and so it was. The #1 still appears, saying that there is a big problem, which is that now the bathroom was very busy. But even so, they found a way to solve all the problems. The next day Aiga wakes up saying good morning, and who was in the was Tiana, who was looking out the window. She ends up noticing and says good morning, sits on the sofa, and the two become completely silent. Aiga said that he will make a black tea, but there is not much sugar left, but she asks to wait. She is very sorry for everything that happened. Aiga says that she was not to worry, and soon afterward, she says that she has already read the story that was published in the magazine of the Kings of Adventurers, and really he was very passionate for adventure. Aiga apologizes, saying that he is different from a retiree that she knows. But maybe that is very normal, and also he says that he read the publication about him and, well, that is not what he means. He was curious about what the rest of the people would think about the achievements. Soon afterward, Aiga says that they are having difficulty, that he read the news about them. Those reporters are nothing related to adventures, but they still are like that. She says that she only reads things that help at work, and he understands. Soon afterward, the rest of the people arrive. They would sleep more and more, so they end up gathering like that. Aiga ends up looking at everyone from a distance, then they decide to leave. The port was completely crowded with people, and thus in the distance, Galshias approaches asking if Aiga is sad, and so people start leaving. But Aiga notices something, and thus he runs to call Tiana's attention, who looks back happy. And soon afterward, Aiga tells her to inform Cross that he will find his own way to the Holy Land, and that he was to wait for him. Tiana gets sad, because after all, the person he cares about most is always Cross. Thus, also the #1 heroine flew far away, and the house was quiet again. But that was not to be said. If the mansion gets busy, he would have to hire a maid, and that is what Aiga was trembling, recruiting people. remembers that Iga was remembering something. The ship was almost ready for them, and next week there will be 3 boats that can accommodate up to people. That means a lot that the adventures abroad were happening, but the remaining problem is adventurer certification, and the travel costs for an expedition would be very expensive. At that moment, the miner arrives, which ends up scaring the people. He was all dirty, so he asks what was happening, and soon he says that they finally managed it. The magic ore ended up being found, so the territory could export magic ores like that. Then Aga ends up using illumination magic on everyone, and it seems that the spirit ring, when it comes to the depths of mining fire, was taboo. But that spell was an illumination that he was going to help everyone like that. They move forward, and they look like some small-sized hills from afar. But something was happening. Igarashi approaches, and she had a difficult face. Iga asks if she needs to go to the bathroom, but that was not it. It was a bit complicated. The women will bathe now. It was inevitable anyway. This kind of problem is an adventure too. It was an important matter, but men could easily make bushes, but women cannot. So sometimes there is an excellent one called Female Adventurer Urinary Continence. Another shy girl with pride sometimes hides her delicate problems and tries to hold it. And after those incidents, the whole group finds it hard to say, so for these tragic things not to happen again, everyone has to be brave to ask the other for that to ensure a trouble-free journey. But Igarashi's appearance does not look like she was holding it. Maybe she is scared, but she says that it was not that. It was an above-average fear, and soon man wonders about Galshia's, but he was having problems with some elemental monster, and thus, Iga decides to run to help him. Thanks to spiritual power, Iga thought that those spirits were already under control, but there was still one more. Iga holds and saying that he is about to fight, but Igarashi holds him, and he asks what was happening. She says that she does not believe in ghosts, and that it was just an invention. And so, ghost monsters are special if they are strengthened by human fear. The miner is still fine, not because he has strong spiritual power. It is because they are so focused on the work that they do not pay attention to anything else. And this one got closer to drain Igarashi's energy. But Iga asks her not to be afraid, that he would exterminate the light now, and she asks him to do that. Soon Galshias asks how he could attack a monster without entity, but if using fire to burn them in that cave, he would be committing something terrible. Iga will hold, and thus he activates a spiritual power, and the success was done. The spell now looks like the priests of the church. It was a very calm elemental spell. He is proficient in all intermediate level spells. Exploring low-level caves was incomparable, but then it was no longer to say that he is useless at high level, so now they could go further. They should stop thinking about that which he said at the beginning. At the beginning when he went to explore that mine, he was also afraid of spirits. But just thinking of them as a monster, it is no longer scary for Aga. So Aga really was an adventurer. He could even deceive himself that way. Only that soon afterward, walking a lot, they realized that they found the natural magical ore mine. It was a huge stone that drew everyone's attention. And soon they end up preparing, counting directly on the miner, who ends up activating his marmot skills to collect the larger stones. Soon afterward, Iga asks, since when he got those skills, but he does not remember very well. Recently, 75 people on the selection team were actively leveling. From the experience it was passed on to the miner who was marked with the receiver skill. If they are going to embark on an overseas adventure soon, they will get many experience points. Iga wonders to what extent Destined would increase the miner's level at home. Galshias was very happy with the ore still. It looks great, and again that magical ore seems to be emitting an aura, so being able to go negotiate could earn a lot of money. But before all that, no one intends to sell magical ores now. Galshias asks why. If the ores continue to be sold in a raw manner, that land would soon perish, and Galshias understands that. At that time the village perished due to the lack of ores. Therefore the resources that are there now are not limited. Basically the magical ores would be used effectively. I will process the smaller products, and then they would sell, and surely they would earn more than that in trade. People will try to obtain something that they cannot produce on their own for a good price. This is just selling ores. They would be forced to sell them for lower prices, and thus the heritage of the whole territory would be offered. It is very difficult to do business in such a territory. Soon afterward, Igarashi appears, saying that Iga received a letter, and soon they ask from whom it is. It was from the Adventurers Guild. He wonders what would be happening. They opened a letter saying that finally, Igarashi asks what happened. Then Iga said to explain that, from now on they are officially recognized by the guild, and they receive the Adventurer Certificate. And from today, in that territory, he would be an adventurer. Right at that moment, they end up displaying all the information to the people, and that certification was done. There was a swordsman, archer, mage, support, archer again, and a boxer. 6 people said goodbye to the selective team and joined the palace, the first important meeting of the territory's adventurer organization. The group's name still makes Aiga a little embarrassed. Soon afterward, they ask what those classifications mean. But it is that they were in the recruit classification, and later could move to an intermediate, and thus move to the high ranking and then to the senior ranking, to reach the highest classification. Then you will receive an invitation from the headquarters of the Adventurers Organization, and then receive a high-ranking mission. That was Aiga's biggest goal, which they could set aside for now. Soon afterward, they ask if anyone knows what the benefits are that will come with an adventurer certification. One of the boys raises his hand, saying that now they will look cool, but it was completely wrong. Soon the girl says that if they complete and build the guild's missions, they would be able to travel to the areas. That would be very good. Those areas are very important to them. But they vary from forests, dungeons, towers, ruins, and areas that have special beasts are normally existing from modern civilization, so they are isolated. That means that the personnel will mobilize an army of 150 people to those areas, and in that the personnel will enter. Each one will lead a squad of 25 people. Everyone gets excited about that. They were surprised, wondering why when they heard that kind of thing. But the group was different. It was fuller. And it was true that, therefore, if they cooperate, it will be much harder. So I hope everyone can do it. They will certainly grow because Aiga's disciples. A week later, they got the giant wooden boats, and thus Aiga looked very excited. The Lord says that he wishes that the man has a safe trip full of success. Aiga says, thanking that he will use those 3 ships very carefully. But it was not to worry. The ships are very strong, and that guy is always so cautious. Besides that, he was friendly. Next, the Lord says that Aiga will not need to worry about controlling the ship or dealing with sea problems. They could leave it with subordinates. Soon afterward, I hope that we introduce ourselves, saying that we were very grateful for Aiga's help. It was the man who asked for help with the giant monkey. And soon they would like to send the samurai leader and those 3 subordinates to serve Aiga. Afterward, he would send a group of experienced sailors to help as well. Man asks if it is okay to mobilize both the commanders and the sailors. But the Lord says that they wanted to defeat that beast, and the territory's residents are quite excited, as the samurai and everyone were a little embarrassed, and leave everything to Aiga. However, I hope that he can mature to make those skills have great expectations, and that was what the Lord was thinking. He had the same thought as I, Mandarin, in the capital. So they had several plans behind, and still had to believe in that. Then it was time to get to work. The residents end up making flags and thanking for everything, asking for them to return with care. Thus the swordsman approaches, saying that the 150 members are already on board. Everything was perfect. Soon afterward, Aiga says that it was time to go. The crew of 150 people left the eastern pole, and now they will eventually arrive in a traditional area. It was an area with many trees and forests. There are many beginner dungeon exploration missions there. Moreover, there are several villages and cities where merchants frequently appear, and that certainly was an ideal place for adventurers. The last time that Aiga was in a 2-person group at that time, they had almost no money. Now they are a little precarious. They will have to be careful with that money on the journey. Someone knocks on the door and Aiga asks to come in. It was the swordsman, saying that in half an hour they will arrive at the first city. Aiga thanks for that, but Aiga also asks the man to wait. When the ship anchors, it was to call 3 people to go with him, and they wanted to celebrate as a small party to cheer things up. But it seems one says that it was an honor to be invited by Aiga in that way, and thanks because he would send immediately. Arriving at the port, they end up landing there, and thus the city was perfect. Very beautiful, and there were many people in trade as well. Igarashi says that that was very cool, while Galshia says that they could decide that that city was very well developed. Aiga asks everyone to get in line because he will give 10 minutes for them to line up, and that one slow person could delay the whole team. Some say that they could be having a picnic at school, and from now on until nightfall they are free from work. But they were not to spend the money. Next, Galshias and Igarashi should go too. The others will arrive there soon. Soon, they ask what Aiga will do. He says he is going to the guild to finalize some things before they start operating. Soon afterward, someone was watching them from a distance, and is happy about that. Aiga goes to the Adventurers Guild to do a check made on the license. Aiga hands over his license. After confirming his identity, he talks about the information of the surrounding monsters. If it is the basic intermediate level, the team will be able to defeat them. And finally, if they manage to cooperate very well, The box was only 10%. Then the possibility of the boss appearing at that moment. Someone tries to touch Aga. He looks back quickly, but there was no one. Then he says it was better to return to Galcius. After that, at that moment, the person managed to grab something. Then they go to the food court. Everyone is happy to be invited to that party, and soon Galcius says that maybe he could help quickly, but there was still one person who had not arrived. He said he would arrive late in the end, so they should start eating. The food was perfect. Aga says he used to go to that restaurant when he was younger, so everyone could eat as they pleased. The beer was great. There were many dishes they had never heard of, and that food was absolutely perfect. Meanwhile, Aga decides to take a look with his magic. One of them was a carpenter and another a blacksmith, so they are not the warrior type. They are talented in logic. Meanwhile, he looks back. Miss Igarashi did not want to eat. She was afraid that there was something in the food, but it was not to worry. Thus, she starts stuffing the sausage with everything into her mouth but cannot eat, and soon he asks her to try the mashed potatoes, and thus she hands the sausage to him. Satisfied with that, the meal is on him. But soon, Iga's wallet disappeared, so everyone started worrying about what to do now. Soon, Iga stands on the table and asks if it is time to pay already. No. Then a person comes out of the wall asking if he noticed. It was a woman who was there. She noticed that Iga had very sharp eyes. He used to be a professional adventurer in the end. She was a ninja, and so she wonders if Iga could become her master. This little trick was to test his ability. This ended up irritating the whole gang a lot. Soon afterward, she was an ally. Iga says that her killing intentions were clearly that there was no such thing. She had been following since they were on the ship. This helped to consider her an ally. Soon afterward, the woman says that she was seen through, and please it was to feel free to give her orders. The outfit looks like a ninja's, and everyone was impressed with that, but stopping to think, the technique she used seems to be a joke to her. In that case, Aga will have to pay more attention to things. The next morning, they go to the mission territory in a forest. The forest was full of killing intentions. That is why the trees grow so tense. Even on an afternoon like that, the sun cannot shine there. It is as if a gigantic demon were opening its mouth and inviting them to enter, which was scary. The first time he went to the list, he was extremely scared, and Iga thought he was trembling. Now that time he was full of people around him. The squad, with more than 150 members. That was the appearance of the adventurer group that struggled so much. It was time to fight now. In the interest of raising the level of the 150 members who were taken by the hand, they went to a forest, an unknown dungeon of the cities, where many monsters lived that they had faced until then. They will split into groups of 25 people, and each group should form a line. Thus, the group would fight with that divided number. And it is not practical to assume that there was space for 150 people, but fighting inside those places would cause a lot of problems, because the cave currently would become very unfavorable for them. Besides, if attacked by heavier monsters, it would be bad. Everyone starts to get ready, and there everyone was prepared. On the first day, each group will enter the forest and fight at least once. They ask if it would not be better to go all at once, but that they will start the next day. It is that they want to observe first how they will be effective in each group that would be cooperating. Now the first should form and they could proceed. Now while they are going, currently there is one more reason why Iga was doing this, to make sure that everyone would be prepared to fight. Soon afterward, they ask for the group leader to use a low lantern, and thus it is done for each person. But if that is too bright, it would cause many problems, because it would show everyone's location to the group. So they should proceed, being careful with what could happen. Now she could use the search, and as soon as the enemy's trail was showing, there is a green shoulders frame, and everyone gets scared at that. But Iga asks the people to stop that. Otherwise the enemy varies them, I would hear, and now they could prepare an attack. The strongest group now I could have, support magic attack, and she could use the search as well. And also with the hands up, the enemies would see that. Now the mages could make a little fire and hold because they should not release yet. They would talk with arrows and weaker weapons. Having made the archives, they end up attacking everyone at once. They ask if the people were noting how many times they hit, and the group ended up attacking quite a lot, even without being very experienced at that. The group leader's magic support was very perfect, and that is why they were better. Now at that moment the fireballs could advance with everything, and at that moment the monsters begin to fall to the ground one by one. Those who remained standing could be finished, and after the X-Swords finish, everything was done. They realized that they managed to defeat a bigger monster, and now they were excited about all that fight that could come ahead. The monsters gave 20 silver arrows, and now they could realize that that was an immense luck. The the monsters had would consume some objects, so they would have to make sure to have the chance of them delivering in several items for then. It is at that point the boss was a monster that gives the most valuable items, so the whole group starts to prepare for more battles after that, and several monsters ended up appearing in front of them to attack. Some of them ran out of magic power, but after finishing the first expedition, they obtained 10 silver arrows, a gold bracelet, and 15 pieces of titanium, which was really something very good, and now they will be arbiters of getting some money with that. Thus, they go with the second group, and the same thing happens. The second group manages to improve a lot in the fight, and everyone was watching. The strength power of their leader was a lot, and helped the people to manage to get much better. Thus, they could not use search like the previous group. Then the vanguard needs to get close to the enemy first, and thus they will be full there. Archers and mages would give support to the vanguard from the back lines, and the hardest to adopt consistently was that the items they obtained were a copper lamp and 15 iron nails. Now the people could raise the level of feeling, and everyone was excited about that. Iga ends up thinking of that group's leader as a mother, and it was a wonderful effect on everyone who was around there. Soon afterward, we go to the third group one day. The people were observing the monsters a lot. There were 2 red goblins right ahead, and they were eating dead bodies and some monkeys. I want a good job now. They could proceed a little. The look of that life was very good, and she does not need light to observe around that darkness. Soon he asks if she could hit the vitals, and that could give a better chance for them. At that moment, that was what she would try. The special equipment she had was wonderful for that kind of situation, and thus she shoots with everything a monster, hitting one of the vital points. They start screaming, and Iga realizes that it seems that they were lifeless at that moment. Soon afterward, she says that she would show more the monsters, and thus she jumps from the trees. She has a special equipment that was just a skirt that increased her mobility, so he gave those special equipment because the whole group also did not have much training. They were very weak and needed to have some better equipment. Soon she says that at 2 o'clock there is a monster, and they keep thinking about that. Different from the red goblins, the tree monsters have no vital point, so you cannot kill them instantly. Soon she warns that the monsters were coming on top of their management, and now Iga warns to attack them. That time the other archers and mages should check the sites to attack too, and thus the different lines were shown. None of them had problematic attacks. However, the damage that was dealt from the group leader's arrows still did not manage to have many problems. The team should be better at the right time, and now they will relocate. Iga says that next time they could move forward, only that the girl falls in front of him, and he gets startled at what was happening. He calls her attention, asking if she is wearing something under the skirt, and she does not understand very well. But it seems not. Do not increase. She wears the same thing as Chio, but it seems that it is of that culture really does not have any custom of wearing something underneath. It was a disaster. Then they could leave. The next group was very good too. It was led by a person who was a mountain hunter, so he has a much better offensive culture. Moreover, he can perceive the marks that were left for the enemies and the structures as well that were being made. It was similar to Group C, but there were still some other benefits because of the hunter skills. Iga ends up alone at that moment, realizing that that group was done. Soon afterward, after all that, they go to the group, and that was with quite a lot of problems. At that moment, the people were not wanting to follow the leadership because it seems that there were many problems in the leadership and the group, and there is not really a person who could hold the others that way. So he filled that moment with stronger people, and maybe that is a mistake that Iga must have made. And now, hearing that, the leader has some complement to a plan, and the people really wanted to know what would happen at that moment. They ask what he would do to deal with the monsters in that situation. And crazy that they wanted the leader to take a good look, because he was the only one who could do something at that time. Soon the leader gets irritated with the people, saying that he, the leader, then will take care of everything, and there was no problem in that situation. Right after Iga and his company spent every last cent he had, they went to a main city, and there they went to the editorial department. The editor was completely lost, talking to the journalist, because at that moment she was refusing. The editor was putting her in charge of the articles of the high-ranking group, which would be a good job related to everything she does. She really gets excited about this, but in the end, she refuses to do an article about the group. Soon the editor says that the article about Iga's island was completely popular, and he is very happy to hear that, but if she manages to keep the same quality of article about the high-ranking group, it would be much more a reason for her to work and become more and more popular. It was just to take a look at what they were doing. The top 5 managed to fight against the giant monsters, and so the more dragons the monsters were, the fantasy was not very surprising, and their fantastic talents were more and more impressive. And everyone was working hard for this, because the girl had come back, and her ability had become stronger and stronger now. Everyone said that God, for the weight love of Aga, still had much for them to attack and defend efficiently. That group was keeping an eye. The editor says it was amazing the point of their supernova, and they still managed to put in the newspaper this kind of thing. If here the journalist ended up hitting everything on the table, reading directly the fact they did God to the dead weight of Iga. The editor says that he understands that she had enthusiasm with the medium-ranking adventurer, but that extended to the domain of Iga. She should understand that that group has much more potential. Soon she asks if it was true the domain of Iga will become stronger and stronger from now on, and that is why she needs to stay on top of him for this kind of thing. Iga was the one who raised all the 5 fantastics. It is because of this that he will be able to raise a city in the same path, and if he wants to talk about the potential someday, they at least will take that to the maximum. But everyone ends up laughing at that situation. The editor says that if she does not take her work seriously or venture with validity from now on, he expects her to interview the top 5. Meanwhile, in the castle, everyone goes to their room among the top 5, and only Mori stays there standing saying that today was a good job. They are treating all that as work, and soon Mori wonders when it was that all this became like that. They were normal that everyone stayed together after a mission, and rarely they stayed separated to share food, sweets, among other things. Mori feels that this kind of thing will never change, and soon she feels someone moving under the blanket, and so she wonders if there was someone there. And when she throws the blanket up there, was heroine number 1, who was sleeping in Mori's bed. She pulls Mori with everything to sleep with her, and soon Mori ends up not realizing how she got through there, since the window was broken and there was no way to know that she had entered. Soon, Mori asks her to wake up as fast as possible, but the girl simply kisses her with everything and keeps kissing many times until she wakes up and then apologizes. After all that situation, Mori says it was all fine and then she jumps on top of him again. Soon, Mori says that she is a perfectly normal 5-year-old girl, and right after that they slept together. But there was a problem. Heroine number 1 noticed something different. Mori had her eyes stamped and asks if something happened. If the group ended up hurting themselves, the magic was stagnant, if she was hungry or something like that. But it was nothing. She was just feeling down. She was thinking about whether she was having fun now, but it seems that all good things end up going to an end sooner or later. But then Mori, after a while, ends up sleeping, and heroine number 1 notices that she was very tired and decides to play a little. Right after that, she takes off the girl's clothes and really notices that she was a girl in the end. Getting scared with that, she screams. The next day, Tiana enters the room, saying that Mori is already 15 years old and still believes that she is too old to wear those underwear. And soon she had slapped heroine number 1 with everything. She was starting to wear that because she wanted to be a boy and just never managed to change the lower part. Soon, Tiana says that they could buy something later and buy some appropriate underwear that could change sooner or later. Right after that, the door closes and Mori gets completely angry, saying that heroine number 1 is really a terrible person and should never do that kind of thing to me. Then Mori simply cannot believe that this kind of thing was happening. Then she decides to go down to the hall and see Tiana, who was reading there. But in the middle of this, she notices something. Before she draws Tiana's attention, she prepares and stays quiet. And so who arrives there was Cross, who decides to take some of Tiana's time. He takes 2 invitations, saying if she was interested and to use that for him, it was invitations to go to the movies. Mori ended up noticing this right away. This kind of thing was mentioned before, and soon after Roberta ends up warning that Tiana said to wait to see these things before, and with Mori coming back, and now some missions finished now, they could take some time to relax. And also they have nothing to do today. Tiana said that it was true, but she was not especially interested. Soon, she says that she could take that as a chance to give a direct answer as fast as possible, and soon Tiana says that she could not date Cross. This leaves the boy standing, and simply he gets up sad with what could happen, and soon he asks if she likes someone, but Tiana says that was not it. It is that she does not intend to date anyone. Roberta says that this was right, and that she said that because they were worried about the missions, but it was not exactly that she wanted to say. Cross said that he understands her simply with a great sense of responsibility, but sooner or later that will simply fall on her, and she will lose when she tries to interrupt. Roberta says for her to just listen, and that she promised she would isolate that thought of hers all the time, and asks if she knows why. Cross says that it is simply because people could not live a life without love. That was not what she was thinking. Tiana says maybe, but she was very uncomfortable in that situation, and even Mori noticed that that was not the right time to take that kind of courage, and that she needs a lifesaver at that moment. Heroine number 1 appears, and Mori takes that as a chance, calling the attention of heroine number 1, saying that it was better she not disturb Tiana while they are shopping. But she says she would never do that kind of thing. And Roberta ends up calming down, saying that if Tiana had plans to shop with Mori, there was nothing to worry about. Understanding that situation, she apologizes and says that the three were missing each other at that moment. Soon after going out to shop, Tiana says that they should take a look at clothes for Mori, but it was a little embarrassing what she was wearing in the end. In the middle of this, the journalist appears, seeing that Cross was alone. At that moment, she ends up standing still. It seemed like a sign that he was much more prepared at that moment. So she approaches, saying that it was a pleasure to meet him, and asks if she could end up doing an interview with him. She introduces herself, saying that she was a journalist. He asks why she should not be very embarrassed, and that he is simply with an open schedule, and that she could take a look. Also unintentionally, he ends up dropping something. It was a cinema invitation, and she asks why that. He says that he simply could not have that invitation for her, and that today was a day they were going out for a closer mission, and he gives time to return. He wanted to see a little movie so he could take her boyfriend or something like that, but she explains that she does not have a boyfriend. Roberta is paralyzed with that, then says that she could take a friend then, but she also does not have any friend, but ends up thanking. Then first she makes an interview. She threw herself in the middle of this, and he ends up talking about the fights they had and all the things that happened. His answers were very vague and hard to deal with them too. He is very strict, and prepares with all the answers for this kind of thing. Then she thinks that she could give an exposure of his true feelings, somehow. So she asks the question about what he thinks if there is any group he considers rival. He does not understand very well, and soon he talks about heroine number 1 and her group for sure. It was a very complicated situation. Soon after, the journalist says that maybe there must be something in the middle of this, but he was only talking about groups that are in top 1. She needs to throw an iron bar in the middle of this. Soon after, she asks about what he was thinking of the domain of Aga, only that he ends up with a complicated look. But he says that he does not intend to answer these questions that will sensationalize, and that he and Iga do not make a group because of differences in opinions. That was just the difference in fighting abilities. They could follow separate paths, and it would be better for both of them. Both he and Iga understand this, and he respects Iga as a very close friend now. And after that, he hits the table, and the journalist was finally supporting out of the feelings she wanted to hear. Soon she says that it is true because she heard all this from Iga himself. Soon after, she asks if he met Iga, and she says yes, that she did an interview about his nearby activities. Soon he gets excited, asking if that was her article, and really yes, but he needed one more question if he thinks that Iga's domain was like a rival group. But he starts laughing, saying that he read that article by himself. Missions like territory collection were just things that Iga could do. But adventuring was a totally different life of talents and abilities that were outside the path for forces of numbers. They could not make differences that talents could make. And Iga knew that more than anyone. He loved adventure more than everyone. It was simply what he liked the most to do, and he would be sure that maintenance activities were at his skill level. He was very realistic, and could take this skill complex for himself. Calling him realistic makes it seem like Iga was an adult, but in fact it was totally the opposite of that. He simply seems to have a very small version of himself that was very excited to fight everywhere. Weeks have passed since then, and she was tired doing all these magazines with everyone, and it was something that was taking a lot of her. Iga ended up traveling for him. It is very far and thinks that she cannot split in two to do an interview with each one of them. Soon the editor approaches, saying that I saw some incredible news that the 5 Fantastics finally took charge of their first mission of the Demon King level, and they are going to do this to go to the Dragon's Castle. They are happy that they finally took some missions that could make her the cover of the moment, and the instincts were right. But she simply left that moment. It is like a message from God. The castle was simply a point after where Iga was, and that was it. The 5 Fantastics and the domains of Iga were on a collision moment. So let's go to the second day. Iga was at the port preparing for that moment. It was time to tell what happened the day before. The 150 members went on an expedition. They did a lot of good things, but literally spent all the money, and on the next day, everyone was sick. The hangover hit very hard on everyone. Soon, Iga says to them that they could rest, and everyone apologizes. He says that it was all right, and that it was just to be careful with drink and moderation from now on. So he enters the main hall, and he was laughing. But Galcius and Igarashi were not laughing. They say that nothing was fine at that moment because their funds were at zero. Kara knew that, and it was his last moment. Now as leader, they should arrive there simply at the right time. Aiga needs to do something that will help them at that time. But it is not as if he had to take the day off to take into consideration everything that happened. They spent all the necessary funds for potions and fixing the broken equipment, and now they need to get to the next day. Galcius thinks that it would be better for them to pick up some things with the magic ore, but Aiga says that it was to use this as the last resort, that he would have something in mind with that magic ore. Right after that, she asks if they could sell the rice, but it would be very difficult to deal with that. The people of that region have a bread-based diet, and it was much easier for the villages to change from rice to an entire new crop, and managing the foods in that way was priority number one from now on. They would be another mission that was to lead a little the complexity they were dealing with. It was a loan that they needed to make in many forms, so they could even take a bank loan for once. But the bank shows some trade-offs for adventurers. Low-ranking adventurers are unstable, so they end up not having much. Obviously, they change everything completely when it comes to high-ranking adventurer, and it was a little difficult, but soon Igarashi ends up handing something to Aiga. It was 3 million that she had saved, and it was something that she had for herself, and should simply keep all that even after months to work as minister. It was very difficult to show all this. Situation, Aiga asks her to keep it with everything, and apologizes, but lending money from some people could cause many problems. He saw groups break, because of that several times, so there could be a problem if Aiga did not offer much time. But now Galcius says that there is not much money to lend firsthand, and I apologize. Soon they ask if he was not working as an exchanger, and it was really that was what he is. But the stories are starting to build a terrible capital, so he has an excess of money, but it is much more than an investor inventory. Soon his head ends up shining, and there is one thing that he could do. So he borrows from Igarashi to go out a little from the place. Right after that, the meat wonders about what that was all. So the whole day he starts thinking about money. If he should take a job for a day of work would give 8,000 for him, which in total seems 150 adventurers gave a total expense of 300,000. It was like very difficult to take all this into consideration. But soon after, outside, someone was lifting the girl's skirt with the wind skirt, and the folks get totally angry with that. Obviously, the boys who are not at the age to drink were playing back and forth, but these boys were taking scoldings from the older women. Aiga feels pathetic in this. He does not even have enough money to buy the necessary clothes for the folks. It was time for him to do something necessary. He needs to be ready to ask the bank for a loan with everything he has. The question is how he should prepare. First of all, he should show a first impression to everyone. So, a good care and maybe the clothes too. And also, if he wanted to keep his credibility, he could not let the people of the neighboring know about his financial strategies. That spending was a lot. And soon he keeps wondering how she would have the bill after all these villages all ask that much. Someone was approaching, and Aiga asks if it was Igarashi who was there. But it was not her, and who was there in fact was the ninja who asks forgiveness for the intrusion. Igarashi ends up invading his bath and wonders what was happening. Right at that moment, Igarashi gets angry and asks Iga one thing, but he tries to explain what was happening, that it was not that he needs explanation, something like that. But she asks what he was doing, touching a log. Soon Aiga asks if she was seeing someone other than him. She says no. But anyway, there was a smell of woman around him, and asks if something happened there. He says no. But anyway, asks if Galcius was back and says yes, that he wants Aiga to appear outside the bank of the boat. Soon he asks to tell him that he will simply be there in a little bit. And so Aiga keeps thinking about what was happening. Then he goes out to see what was happening. He needs to be more careful in the morning, and so he gets scared with the boxes that were there at that time. Galcius says that maybe all those boxes should take care of the adventures of the next day, that there were many weapons there. Soon Aiga asks if Galcius stole all that, because he said that he had no money or something like that. But soon Galcius says that he was talking to a merchant and does not need money to do this kind of thing. Soon Aiga asks how he could do all that. Without money? It was easy. He simply took a sport credit, and let's say that he still has to pay, but not now. And Galcius asks to be followed for a while, and goes realizing through the city, and there they were in a completely empty warehouse. Soon asks if he bought all that. Galcius says that it was not much. He bought 3 warehouses, and all were full of things in total, that cost 9 million. And yes, Aiga grabs Galcius, saying if he knows where he is going to get 9 billions. Soon after, Igarashi ends up helping, saying that Galcius was right at that moment. They just asked for all that equipment to pay right after. and it seems that now I would sell 9 million of materials, and so they would take 10 million to hold much more. It was the job of a merchant like him. And if you look very well there, he was not simply as an ally, he would keep all those traditions that were said. Right now it was, as Iga was saying, all that was prepared for him, and he just wanted to sell for 10 million. But all that should be equipment enough for all the villages, and for 1 month of adventure. So now he's going to use all that not simply for now. Iga says it was all fine, but 10 million is still a lot of money, and he should be able to turn 9 million into equipment, and only he could easily manage with the adventures they were doing. In 30 days, he could maybe reach 15 million. So he was putting all the accounts in just 1 month, and that was simply it. It was not something as easy as paying a bill at the restaurant. A merchant cannot lend this level of trust right now. And it was just as done. They were calm at that moment. But things need to be understood. It is not as if they did not trust Iga or something like that, but that has much more to run at that time, and to make the payment on time, it could not have a previous piece of credit. However, if he cannot make the payment, everything would cause problems in the end. That is why he needs some collateral. Right after Galcius asks if Iga cannot pay in time, then he will have to promise to compensate him with something that is not money. And soon Igarashi also ends up accepting to do that, and they make a contract. The contract seems that if it goes beyond 10 million and is not paid in just 1 month, he could take care of some materials that were in his possession. And in case he cannot pay on time, the intention was to take some rare ores and rice that were at the place and sell as payment. In the end, Iga ends up understanding it was the contract that they were from the beginning of the shift, and that makes total sense. There is no way to compensate all that. At that moment, it was the best option to take millions without having some problems and spies. However, borrowing money from an ally from a friend was exactly what Iga wanted to leave aside. This could ruin the group, and he could still ask the bank to lend money from a friend. It was complicated. Galcius says that if he is with problems in the head, he would just have all right to sell that for something more. He is just a seller after all. He can turn that into more money. He just needs the trust really to be sure to sell some magic ores to him, and so he could mitigate the risk that was to make a good deal with him. And so, as he was following it, was typical of transition between the owner and an exchanger after all. They winked at each other, and Eiga stays with hard eyes. Igarashi asks him to be sure that he really is trying hard with that conformity, but they could only take care of all that. Eiga apologizes to both and ends up thanking while he signs the contract. On the next day, they are going to travel to the forest, and so everything stays calm as they could think. The village was taking much more exits, and now the group was coming too, so it was a big help for him at that moment. But someone ends up appearing. That ninja appears again, saying that any care was unnecessary, and they should say that Iga has excellent friends, and that they esteemed him once again. Higa ends up thanking for all that, and so he arrives at the forest to check what was happening, saying that everyone could start today. He accepts everyone at that moment. But the whole group was completely lost today. The whole group would enter the forest in a rotating form, and so they could notice with the monsters that were just ahead, so take any president. Everything was worrying him, since they were without the owners, and now the biggest troublesome ends up arriving, saying that the monsters could not deal with them in that way, and soon asks if the group could go first of all. Iga says it was all fine and that they could proceed. The monsters really were nothing for them, but 30 minutes later they come back completely hurt and with problems everywhere. Eiga gets completely perplexed, wondering what was happening, if it was something that could trigger the alarm, and asks if they were fine. In fact, they were caught off guard and they slept because of some mushrooms that were unexpected. So they just ended up with some mushroom sleeping. In fact, they got 2, and soon asks if they brought something, but in fact, no. Group C ends up preparing to go too, and Iga says it was all fine, and letting each group leave every 10 minutes was really something good. And so they could return out of the forest if something happened. But something was also out of the ordinary. Group A also comes back completely hurt, and they ended up finding a giant monkey and could not run. But while they also did not gain anything, which means that the situation was starting to become very problematic. Recovering their strength was something of an hour, and so they managed the battle of each one substantially. In the end, they still had 6 victories today in total of 18 deaths. But they only recovered some gains. At the blacksmith, she says she could give 70,000 for him because of that, and that it was much less than the other day. He thanks, saying he would return the next day, and the day after they earned 220,000, and in just today, they earned 70,000, which was something very inefficient. Galcius says on the boat that they are in the red. I want 320,000. 320,000 to 70 is 250,000, and it becomes them 250,000 inches the red. Obviously, those people of a simple village were with problems, and that would take a long time for them to get all the judgments after all. But there was a card up the sleeve.